Greetings, lore masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers a topic that plagues even the most hardened veterans of Tamriel: the tedious, often baffling mechanics of the Creation Club's official survival mode. Imagine standing upon the precipice of the throat of the world. The wind is not just a sound effect, it is a physical force tearing at your cloak, carrying the scent of ancient snow and pine. The auroras are dancing overhead, painting the night sky in ribbons of emerald and violet, and down below, the world of men and Mir sleeps in ignorant bliss, while you, the Dragonborn, contemplate the fate of the Kalpa. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated high fantasy. But then, a little red icon blinks in the corner of your vision, and the majesty shatters. You aren't thinking about Alduin the World Eater. You're thinking about how many raw potatoes you need to inhale to stop your stamina bar from shrinking into oblivion. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to Cold Harbour without some serious enchanted gear, and you certainly wouldn't enjoy it if you had to stop every 5 minutes to eat a wheel of cheese the size of a carriage wheel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the realm. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first, and perhaps most glaring intrusion upon our immersion is the insatiable, almost comical gluttony demanded of the Dragonborn. In the standard Skyrim experience, food is largely decorative, a way to heal a few hit points in a pinch, or perhaps just set dressing for a Jarl's longhouse. But in survival mode, food becomes a shackle. We begin our critique here because it is the most immediate physiological demand placed upon the player. The mechanic asserts that to explore the vast frozen tundra of the Pale or the volcanic marshes of Eastmarch, one must possess a metabolism that rivals a blast furnace. Consider the reality of the situation. You awake in a tavern, perhaps the Sleeping Giant in Riverwood. You are peckish. This seems reasonable. A morning meal is a staple of any adventurer's routine. You consume a grilled leek and some bread. In a realistic simulation, or indeed in the real world, this sustenance would fuel you for hours of travel. Yet in the peculiar logic of survival mode, by the time you have walked from Riverwood's lumber mill to the first bridge heading toward Whiterun, your stomach is rumbling with the ferocity of a wild saber cat. The game demands more. The escalation of hunger is not a slow, creeping desperation that adds tension to a long dungeon delve. It is a nagging, constant chore that interrupts the flow of gameplay with the subtlety of a warhammer to the face. To maintain a state of well-fed, which is necessary if you wish to regenerate stamina and wield your weapons with any degree of competence, the Dragonborn must consume a volume of food that defies the laws of physics. We're talking about 3 scorched venison chops, 2 apple cabbage stews, and a loaf of bread, all consumed within the span of a single in-game afternoon. If you were to visualize this, the Dragonborn would not be the lithe, agile warrior leaping onto the backs of dragons. They would be waddling through the snow, weighed down by the 10 pounds of meat sitting heavy in their gut. There is a profound disconnect between the narrative stakes and the gameplay loop here. You are the last Dragonborn, a being with the soul of a Dover, capable of shouting reality into new shapes. You are destined to face Alduin in the mists of Sovngarde, and yet you are brought to your knees not by a high-level Deathlord or a vampire matriarch, but by the fact that you haven't eaten a salmon steak in the last 20 minutes. The hunger debuff creates a scenario where the hero of the prophecy spends more time looking for a cooking spit than looking for the Elder Scrolls. This brings us to the specific mechanics of the food itself. In the base game, players are well acquainted with the simple joy of finding a sweet roll or a carrot. In survival mode, however, the hunger value of items becomes the primary metric of their worth, leading to bizarre dietary habits. Raw food, for instance, now carries the risk of food poisoning, which is a fair addition in theory. But the cooked alternatives provide such paltry satisfaction to the hunger meter that you're forced to hoard food like a paranoid squirrel. Take the vegetable soup, a staple for many combat-focused players. It is a well-established piece of lore and gameplay utility that vegetable soup provides passive health and stamina regeneration, allowing for infinite power attacks and shield bashes even when your stamina is technically depleted. In the vanilla game, this is a powerful, if slightly broken, tool. In survival mode, the soup is barely an appetizer. It fills a minuscule portion of the hunger bar. To stay fed, you're pushed toward heavier, more complex meals, which requires carrying significant weight in ingredients. This turns the inventory screen into a grocery list management simulator. You aren't checking your inventory to admire the blade of woe, you're checking to see if you have enough salt piles to cure the hawker meat you just carved off a carcass on the coast of the Sea of Ghosts. Speaking of salt piles, this humble ingredient becomes more valuable than gold dust. Every meaningful recipe that provides a substantial reduction in hunger requires salt. This shifts the economy of the game in a strange direction. You find yourself raiding bandit camps not for their septims or their enchanted daggers, but for the sacks of flour and bowls of salt on their tables. The Dragonborn becomes less of a hero and more of a wandering vagrant scavenger, obsessing over condiments. There is an obscure lore tidbit that makes this gluttony even more perplexing. If one reads Uncommon Taste by the Gourmet, a book found throughout Skyrim, often associated with the Dark Brotherhood questline, there is distinct emphasis on the art of cooking, on the savouring of flavours, and the delicate balance of ingredients like a singular gold coin for texture, or the grinding of giant's toe. The lore suggests that cuisine in Tamriel is an art form, a source of culture and pleasure. Survival mode reduces this rich cultural backdrop to a simple binary fuel gauge. You do not eat the potage le magnifique to savour the gourmet's genius. You shovel it into your mouth to make the red bar go away so you can swing your sword at normal speed again. The joy of the lore is stripped away, replaced by the tyranny of the meter. Furthermore, the community has long debated the nature of the Dragonborn's physiology, a discussion that survival mode unintentionally inflames. There is a prevailing fan theory that attempts to justify this absurd caloric intake, the dragon soul metabolism theory. Fans have speculated that the Dragonborn's body, being a mortal vessel containing the immortal soul of a dragon, an Akka shard, requires immense energy to maintain its integrity. Dragons, after all, are timeless, but their physical forms are massive and powerful. The theory suggests that channeling the Thuum and absorbing dragon souls burns calories at a supernatural rate. While this is a fascinating attempt to make sense of the mechanics, it falls apart when you consider that regular NPCs in survival mode don't seem to suffer the same fate. Yet the player character, who should be superior, is the one fainting from hunger after missing lunch. If the Dragonborn truly burned energy that fast, the heat radiating from their body would likely melt the snow around them, rendering the cold mechanic, which we will discuss later, entirely moot. Let's linger for a moment on the visual dissonance this hunger creates during high-tension moments. Picture the quest, The Fallen. You have trapped Odahviing in Dragon's Reach. The Jarl is watching. The guards are tense, their hands gripping their spears. You're about to interrogate an ancient dragon to learn the location of Alduin's portal. But wait, your stomach grumbles. your attack speed has dropped by 30%. So, right there on the great porch of Whiterun, in front of a captive dragon and the Jarl, the Dragonborn pauses to eat 12 whole cabbages and a leg of goat. The dragon waits, the Jarl waits, the tension evaporates. The game mechanics have successfully murdered the narrative pacing. It is not just the frequency of eating, but the sheer volume. When you look at the hunger restoration values, a single apple does almost nothing. A loaf of bread does very little. To fill the bar from starving to well-fed, you're consuming thousands of calories in seconds. It feels less like survival and more like competitive eating. The Dragonborn essentially behaves like a creature preparing for hibernation every single day. The mechanic also fails to account for the diversity of races in Skyrim. A Bosmer, wood elf, according to the Green Pact, is a strict carnivore. Yet the game mechanics punish them for eating raw meat with potential disease, forcing them to cook it, which implies a reliance on fire and preparation that might not always align with a hunt-and-eat interplay. An Argonian, with their resistance to disease and amphibious nature, should logically have a different metabolic requirement, or at least a wider range of safe foods, perhaps raw fish. Yet they are largely bound by the same oppressive hunger loop as a high elf who has never seen a campfire in their life. The nuance of the lore is flattened. Even the presentation of the hunger is intrusive. The sound effect of the stomach rumbling is visceral, yes, but it plays with such frequency that it becomes a background track of annoyance rather than a signal of danger. In other survival games, hunger is a slow burn, a strategic layer that forces long-term planning. In Skyrim survival mode, it is a nagging toddler tugging at your cape, demanding a snack every time you try to have a serious conversation with a greybeard. As we traverse the landscape, we are constantly on the lookout for barrels. In the base game, barrels were largely ignored unless you were desperate for a few apples to sell. Now, you are effectively a raccoon, rummaging through every crate in Riften, hoping for a salt pile or a sack of flour. This changes the heroic fantasy into a vagrant simulator. You are the Thane of Whiterun, the Archmage of the College of Winterhold, the listener of the Night Mother, and yet your primary daily concern is whether you have enough cooked salmon to make it to Ivarstead without passing out. Ultimately, the hunger mechanic in survival mode serves to highlight the artificiality of the game rather than immerse you in it. Instead of feeling like a gritty survivor battling the elements, you feel like a Tamagotchi that constantly needs to be fed. It turns the majestic act of exploration into a grocery run. The Dragonborn, a figure of legend and prophecy, is reduced to a stomach with legs, wandering the province in search of the next meal, the grand destiny of saving the world, playing second fiddle to the immediate crushing need for a venison stew. The immersion is not deepened, it is drowned in a bowl of soup. Once you have managed to stuff the Dragonborn's gullet with enough venison to feed a small hold, you step out the heavy wooden doors of the inn, ready to face the world. But the moment the loading screen fades, a new tyrant seizes control of your adventure. It is not a dragon nor a Daedric prince, but the thermometer. In survival mode, the air itself tries to kill you, and unfortunately it does so with a mechanical clumsiness that turns the majestic, snowy peaks of Skyrim into no-go zones rather than frontiers to be conquered. The province of Skyrim is defined by its harsh beauty. The pale, Winterhold, and the snowy reaches of Hafengar are designed to be hostile, yes, but they are also the stage for some of the game's most atmospheric storytelling. In the base game, you wander through the blizzard, the wind howling in your ears, feeling the idea of cold without being shackled by it. In survival mode, this atmosphere is replaced by a shrinking health bar and a frantic, undignified scramble for heat sources. The cold mechanic introduces a warmth rating to all clothing and armour, and this single stat manages to destroy the fashion and role-playing potential of the game in one fell swoop. Here is the reality of the warmth rating. It forces you to dress like a bandit drifter for the majority of the game. We all know the progression. You spend hours grinding your smithing skill, crafting hundreds of iron daggers or dwarven bows, all to finally unlock the ability to craft daedric or dragonplate armour. You envision yourself clad in armour forged from the blood of gods and the bones of eternal beasts, a walking tank of impenetrable defence. You craft the set, upgrade it to legendary, and step out into the snow. And within 30 seconds the snowflake icon appears on your screen, pulsing ominously. Your movement speed slows, your weapon's swings become sluggish, your health bar turns black, capping your maximum vitality. Why? Because your demon-forged plate mail is cold. The game mechanics dictate that the humble fur armour, specifically the variant with sleeves, has one of the highest warmth ratings in the early to mid-game. This creates a ludicrous visual narrative where the saviour of Tamriel, the Thane of Solitude, and the harbinger of the companions, is forced to run around wearing ragged wolf pelts because the intricate steel plate armour offers as much insulation as a wet paper towel. You're incentivized to look like a low-level highwayman rather than a hero. The aesthetic progression of your character, visually evolving from simple leathers to ornate enchanted metals, is halted by the weather. You find yourself carrying a winter outfit and a combat outfit, swapping them constantly in menus, which breaks the immersion the mode claims to foster. There is a specific core in-game fact that players encounter which highlights this absurdity. The warmth rating is often completely divorced from the material logic of the lore. Glass armour, made from malachite, is described as light and strong, but logically, wearing volcanic glass in a blizzard should freeze you instantly. Yet, it often outperforms heavy iron, which would conduct the cold straight to your skin. The inconsistencies force players to memorize arbitrary numbers rather than rely on intuition. You look at a set of steel plate, layered with fur underneath visually, and assume it's warm. The game says no. You look at the Skarl armour, which looks incredibly warm, and it is, but getting it requires traversing Solstheim, an island covered in ash and snow, which you can't survive because you don't have the warm armour yet. It is a circular frustration. This brings us to the tyranny of the freezing status effect. As you get colder, your lockpicking and pickpocketing skills suffer, which makes sense. Shivering hands are clumsy. But the severity of the penalty ramps up so quickly that exploration becomes a series of frantic sprints. You stop looking at the scenery. You stop searching for hidden chests behind rocks. You stop reading the landscape for environmental storytelling clues. Instead, your eyes are glued to the compass, looking for the fire icon. The game devolves into a game of the floor is lava, except the floor is snow and the safe zones are random campfires. Consider the torch dance. Every survival mode player knows it. You're freezing to death in the middle of the wastes of Winterhold. There is no shelter. So you equip a torch. It provides a tiny amount of warmth. You stand there, huddled against a rock, holding a stick of fire, waiting for the snowflake icon to recede. It doesn't recede, it just stops growing. You are stuck in limbo. The heroic Dragonborn, Slayer of Alduin, is reduced to huddling next to a burning stick, afraid to move forward because the wind might blow slightly harder. There is also the matter of the racial passives, which sparks a massive community debate that has raged since the mode's release. The Nords, the native people of Skyrim, have a racial resistance to frost damage. 50% resistance to frost. Lore-wise, they are built for this land. They originated from Atmora, a continent frozen in time and ice. Yet, in survival mode, a Nord freezes to death almost as quickly as an Imperial or a Breton. Fans have argued endlessly that Nords should have a massive innate bonus to the warmth rating, allowing them to traverse their homeland without needing to dress like a bear. The fact that a Nord hero can freeze to death in a brisk wind outside Windhelm, the city of kings, feels like a betrayal of the setting's fundamental lore. If the Nords are so susceptible to the cold, why did they build their capital city in a place where the water freezes in the harbour? Speaking of water, the freezing water mechanic is perhaps the most lethal and least forgiving aspect of this system. In the base game, swimming is a valid way to travel or escape enemies. In survival mode, stepping into the icy waters of the north is essentially suicide. The cold damage ticks rapidly, draining your health directly. While realistic, it renders huge swathes of the map unexplorable. The shipwrecks in the Sea of Ghosts, off limits unless you have a stack of expensive potions or the Flame Cloak spell ready. And even the Flame Cloak spell, a master level concept of wrapping yourself in magical fire, offers inconsistent protection against the environmental cold. You are literally on fire, yet the game decides you are still chilly. Let's touch on an obscure lore tidbit regarding the magical mineral known as Stalrim. In the book Stalrim, a new source of Stalrim, and through dialogue with the Skald, we learn that Stalrim is enchanted ice, hard as iron but perpetually cold to the touch. It serves as a sort of sarcophagus material for ancient Nords. Logic would dictate that wearing a suit of literal magical ice would be the worst possible choice for survival in a blizzard. You're encasing yourself in the very element that is killing you. Yet, Stalrim armour has a decent warmth rating. Conversely, Dwemer armour, powered by steam and heat, often visually venting steam, should be a walking heater. Yet it is often categorised merely as heavy armour with standard warmth. The lore of the materials is ignored for the sake of a simplified binary stat system on the item cards. The temperature mechanics also ruin one of the most serene areas of the game, the Forgotten Vale. Introduced in the Dawnguard DLC, this hidden valley is a masterpiece of level design, a vast, icy caldera filled with frozen lakes and Falmer temples. It is a long, arduous trek. In standard Skyrim, it is a hauntingly beautiful journey. In survival mode, it is a nightmare. There are few natural heat sources. You're forced to carry camping supplies, which we will discuss later, just to move 10 feet. The pacing of the quest, which is meant to be a climactic build-up to the confrontation with Archcurate Vertha, is shattered by the need to stop and warm your hands every 2 minutes. The grandeur of the Vale is lost because you cannot lift your head to look at it. You are too busy watching your health bar turn black. Furthermore, the warmth requirement effectively bans you from using some of the most iconic armour sets in the game, until you have leveled up enough to offset their penalties with massive health pools. The shrouded armour of the Dark Brotherhood? Thin leather? Cold. The Thieves' Guild armour? Cold. If you want to play a stealth character in Winterhold, you are out of luck. You cannot sneak effectively while wearing the heavy warm furs required to survive the ambient temperature. The game forces you to choose. Be a stealth archer who freezes to death, or be a loud, lumbering warrior who survives. It pigeonholes playstyles based on geography in a way that feels restrictive rather than strategic. Then there is the issue of hot food. Survival mode introduces the ability to cook hot soups using fire salts. These soups restore your warmth rating and grant a temporary resistance to cold. It sounds like a good mechanic, a magical thermos of sorts, but fire salts are a rare alchemy ingredient, usually dropped by flame atronachs. Suddenly, You're not fighting Atronachs to harvest salts for powerful destruction potions. You're hunting them so you can make soup. The economy of the game shifts again. You find yourself hoarding fire salts like a drug addict, terrified of running out before you have to cross the mountain pass to Morthal. The reliance on a rare drop to mitigate a basic environmental hazard feels unbalanced, turning a simple travel necessity into a grind for resources. Even the interactions with NPCs become jarring. You will often see couriers running through the snow in simple tunics, seemingly unaffected by the sub-zero temperatures that are currently killing you. Guards stand at their posts in open-faced helmets for days on end without complaining. The Dragonborn, a demigod, is the only person in Skyrim who seems to possess a nervous system capable of registering cold. It breaks the illusion of a living world when the rules of survival apply strictly to the player and no one else. You feel less like a part of the world and more like a fragile intruder who forgot their coat. The tyranny of temperature ultimately dictates that you avoid the northern half of the map unless absolutely necessary. The College of Winterhold, the Dark Brotherhood's sanctuary, the ruins of Sarthal, these become chores rather than destinations. You fast travel, if you could, which we'll get to, or take a carriage to the nearest point, sprint to the objective and sprint back. The game world shrinks. The vast white expanses of the map designed to make you feel small and isolated, instead just make you feel annoyed and inconvenienced. The snow is no longer a blanket of beauty. It is a shroud of tedium. Having survived the gnawing hunger and the bone-chilling winds of the Pale, you open your map, eager to deposit your hard-won loot in the safety of Breezehome. You hover your cursor over the Whiterun map marker, click it, and nothing happens. A hollow, mocking silence greets you. The realization washes over you like a bucket of ice water from the Sea of Ghosts. Fast travel is disabled. You're currently standing in the wreckage of a shipwreck on the northern coast, and your bed is roughly half a province away. You have to walk. The removal of fast travel is the flagship feature of survival mode, the hill its defenders choose to die on. The argument is seductive. You'll see so much more of the world, you'll appreciate the scale of Skyrim. And for the first 5 hours, they are right. You notice the way the flora shifts from the hardy snowberries of the north to the lavender of the tundra. You stumble upon unmarked ruins and hunter camps you would have otherwise teleported over. It feels grand. It feels like an adventure. But then the novelty wears off and the crushing reality of the game's quest design sets in. Skyrim was not built for a player who cannot teleport. It was built with the assumption that once you discovered a location, you would never have to manually trudge back to it unless you wanted to. The geography of Skyrim is a beautiful lie. It is a theme park compressed into a square of digital terrain. When you're forced to walk it, the seams begin to show. You realise that the vast wilderness between Riverwood and Falkreath is actually just a 2-minute jog. The epic scale shrinks when you traverse it constantly, becoming a repetitive commute. The long walk transforms the Dragonborn from a legendary hero into a glorified courier with a sword. Consider the Radiant Quest system. This is the core in-game fact that breaks the spirit of the survivalist. You join the Thieves Guild. Vex, sitting comfortably in the Ragged Flagon in Riften, gives you a job. Swipe a jewelled candlestick from the Blue Palace. You look at your map. Riften is in the southeast corner. Solitude is in the northwest corner. You have to traverse the entire diagonal length of the map. You take a carriage, we'll get to those rickety lifesavers in a moment, to Solitude, steal the item, and then you have to go back. The carriage in Solitude costs gold, which is fine, but it only takes you to the stables outside Riften, You then have to walk into the city, down into the Ratway, load into the Flagon, talk to Vex, get paid 200 gold, and get a new job. Steal a ring in Markarth. The realization hits. You're spending 45 minutes of real-time travel for 30 seconds of gameplay. The reward loop is shattered. The gold per hour plummets. But more importantly, the fun per hour evaporates. This brings us to the carriage network. In the base game, carriages are a quaint immersive option. In survival mode, Bjorlum the carriage driver becomes the most important NPC in the game. But the network is flawed. Carriages only travel to the 9 hold capitals. If your destination is, say, Everstead, Rorikstead or Dragonbridge, you're out of luck. You take a carriage to the nearest city and then you walk, and you walk, and you walk. The game tries to mitigate this with horses, but let's be honest about Skyrim's horses. They are not the majestic steeds of Red Dead Redemption. They are suicidal mountain goats with tank controls. They have a nasty habit of charging headfirst into battles they cannot win. You spend 1,000 gold on a horse to speed up your travel, only for it to try and box a frost troll 5 minutes later and die instantly. Now you are stranded in the wilderness, over-encumbered, because the horse was carrying your excess gear. No, wait. Horses don't have saddlebags in vanilla survival, another missed opportunity, and miles from help. The death of a horse in survival mode is not just a financial loss, it is a logistical catastrophe. There is a fascinating obscure lore tidbit found in the Pocket Guide to the Empire, 1st edition, which describes Skyrim. It speaks of the old holds and the treacherous terrain that makes travel dangerous and slow, often taking weeks to cross passes. The lore establishes that Tamriel is massive. The game, by necessity, compresses this. By removing fast travel, survival mode creates an uncanny valley of scale. The world is too small to feel like a weeks-long journey. You can cross it in a day, but too large to be convenient. It occupies a frustrating middle ground where the travel feels like a waste of time rather than a grand expedition. The weeks of lore travel are represented by 20 minutes of holding the W key while dodging wolves. This forced travel also exposes the aggro fatigue. In a fast travel game, you fight enemies when you choose to engage with a dungeon or a quest. In survival mode, you fight every single mudcrab, slaughterfish and wolf pack along the road. The combat loses its stakes. You aren't fighting for your life. You are swatting flies. Oh, look, another pack of 3 wolves near the Forta Mole intersection, just like the last 10 times I walked past here. The randomness of the world is replaced by the predictability of spawn points. You start to memorize where the bears are, not out of immersion, but out of boredom. You stop engaging. You just sprint past them, trailing a conga line of angry wildlife that eventually loses interest. Let's discuss the Civil War questline in this context. General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak love nothing more than to send you back and forth across the province to deliver a single axe or a letter. Take this axe to Whiterun. Walk. Return the axe to Windhelm. Walk. Go to this fort. Walk. Report back. Walk. The narrative urgency of the war, brothers killing brothers, the fate of the empire at stake, is completely dissolved by the sheer boredom of the commute. You find yourself hating your commanding officer not because of their ideology, but because they refuse to use a courier. You are the Dragonborn. Why are you hand-delivering mail? This leads to a prominent fan theory and community debate regarding the magical regression of the Fourth Era. Fans often point out that in Morrowind, players had access to mark and recall spells, allowing them to place a magical anchor and teleport back to it instantly. The Mages Guild had a teleportation network. In Oblivion, fast travel was explained as a convenience, but teleportation magic still existed in lore. By Skyrim, apparently everyone forgot how to teleport. The community argues that a high-level wizard Dragonborn should essentially be able to bend space and time. Why can't the Archmage of Winterhold teleport to the college? Why must they climb the mountain? Survival mode highlights this magical plot hole. If you are playing a master wizard, capable of summoning storms and Daedra, the fact that you have to walk to Morthal like a common peasant feels like a betrayal of your character's power level. The long walk also destroys the pacing of DLC content. Consider the Dawnguard questline. Isran is holed up in Fort Dawnguard, located in a hidden canyon at the absolute agonizing edge of the map past Riften. To get there, you have to go through a cave. Every time you need to speak to him, which is often, you have to travel to the southeast corner of the world, run through a canyon and enter a castle. Then he sends you to Castle Volkihar, which is in the absolute northwest corner of the map, on an island. The questline essentially demands that you ping-pong between the two furthest points of the playable area repeatedly. Without fast travel, the Dawnguard DLC becomes a hiking simulator with occasional vampire dialogue. The drama of the sun being blotted out is less concerning than the wear and tear on your virtual boots, and what happens when you forget something. This is the true horror of the mode. You trek all the way to a Dwemer ruin, deep in the mountains, ready to craft a specific item at the Ethereum Forge. You get there, fight through the Falmer, reach the forge, and realize you left the glowing crystal shard in a chest in your house in Whiterun. In the base game, this is a minor annoyance. You fast travel back, grab it, and return. In survival mode, this is a rage quit moment. That mistake just cost you an hour of real time. The game punishes memory lapses with improved brutalism. There is also the quest marker clutter phenomenon. Because you can't clear a quest quickly, your journal fills up. You grab a quest in a town thinking, I'll do that when I'm in the area. But because moving to a new area is such a production, you never go there. Your quest log becomes a graveyard of good intentions. You have 20 miscellaneous objectives to find the Amethyst Claw, or speak to so-and-so, and you know you will never, ever do them, because they are in Winterhold and you are currently in Falkreath, and the thought of making that journey makes you want to lie down and sleep for an era. The environment itself, while pretty, begins to feel like an obstacle course designed to annoy you. Mountains are not majestic peaks, they are paving blockers. You find yourself trying to Skyrim horse your way up sheer cliffs, jumping spamming against a polygon wall, just to save 5 minutes of walking around the base. You break the immersion yourself because the alternative is spending another 10 minutes walking along a winding road you've seen 1,000 times. You exploit the physics engine to bypass the survival element, because the survival element is simply wasting your time. Even the simple act of selling loot becomes a logistical nightmare. You clear a dungeon. You are heavy. The nearest city is miles away. You can't just pop to the shop, you have to trudge. By the time you get to the shop, it's 8 PM and Belethor has locked his door. Now you have to wait, which makes you hungry and tired. You sleep, if you can find a bed. You eat. You sell your loot. Now you are light again, but you're still in Whiterun, and the next dungeon is back where you started. The loop of action to reward is stretched so thin that the dopamine hit of finding a cool sword dissipates long before you can actually do anything with it. Ultimately, the removal of fast travel reveals that Skyrim is a game designed for fast travel. The quest triggers, the merchant placements, the radiant AI, it all assumes the player can zip around the map. Removing that capability doesn't make the game more realistic, it just breaks the pacing. It turns a thrilling heroic fantasy into a commute. You aren't saving the world. You're just walking in circles, watching the same trees pass by, listening to the same 3 ambient tracks, wondering why the Dragonborn, with the soul of a Dover, hasn't figured out how to fly. So you've walked halfway across the province, fought off the cold, and filled your belly with enough salt-cured meat to induce hypertension. You finally reach the ancient Nordic ruin, the destination of your quest. You delve deep into the crypts, battling Draugr deathlords and dodging trapwires. At the very end, past the puzzle door, you find the boss chest. It is a glorious gilded container glimmering in the torchlight. You crack it open. Inside you see an ebony warhammer, a suit of dwarven plate armour, and a pile of dragon bones. In the base game, this is a moment of triumph. In survival mode, this is a moment of crushing existential despair. Welcome to the shattered spines era of your playthrough. Survival mode slashes your base carry weight from a manageable 300 to a pitiful 150. Read that again, 150. To put that in perspective, a standard set of steel armour with a shield and a weapon takes up roughly a third of that capacity immediately. Add in the warm clothing you're forced to carry to survive the trip home, the 5 pounds of food you need to keep from starving, and the camping supplies, which we will despise properly in a later section, and you are left with the inventory space of a small handbag. The loot goblin instinct, a primal force that drives every RPG player, is violently suppressed here. We are conditioned to pick up everything that isn't nailed down. A silver goblet, yoink, a ruined book, mine, a potion of minor stamina, why not? But under the tyranny of the 150 cap, you're forced to become a ruthlessly efficient accountant in the middle of a dungeon. You stare at that ebony warhammer. It is worth 2,000 gold, but it weighs 28 units. You do the mental math. That's a value to weight ratio of roughly 71 gold per unit. Then you look at a potion of ultimate healing, value 250, weight 0.5, ratio 500. The math dictates you leave the epic demon-smashing hammer rotting in the chest and take the potion. It feels wrong. It feels like a betrayal of the adventurer's code. You're leaving behind artifacts of power because they are slightly too heavy. This leads to the introduction of Inventory Tetris, a mini-game nobody asked for. You spend more time in the menu screen than you do fighting enemies. If I drop these 3 potatoes and this extra pair of boots, can I pick up the enchanted helmet? You drop the potatoes. You pick up the helmet. You're still over-encumbered. You sigh. You drop the helmet. You pick up the potatoes again because you know you'll be hungry in 5 minutes. It is a cycle of misery. Core in-game fact time. In survival mode, items that were previously weightless suddenly develop mass. Arrows and lockpicks are the silent killers of your inventory space. In the vanilla game, you could carry 500 iron arrows and not think twice. They were ammunition. They existed in a vacuum of physics. Now each arrow weighs 0.1 units. A quiver of 100 arrows weighs 10 units. That is the equivalent of a breastplate. You can no longer be the walking armory, ready for a siege. You have to count your shots. And lockpicks, those tiny metal wires, they have weight now too. If you are the type of player who hoards 200 lockpicks just in case, you're wasting valuable capacity that could be used for, I don't know, a dragon scale. The tragedy of the over-encumbered crawl becomes a recurring nightmare. We all know the feeling. You pick up 1 too many garnets, and suddenly your character moves as if they are wading through molasses. In the base game, you could use the whirlwind sprint shout to inch forward, or summon a horse, if outside, to fast travel. In survival mode, fast travel is gone. You cannot teleport your burden away. If you become over-encumbered in the middle of the Velothi Mountains, you are trapped. You cannot run. You cannot fast travel. Your stamina drains rapidly just from moving. You're effectively rooted to the spot until you drop the loot you spent the last hour earning. It is a punishment for success. This weight crisis fundamentally breaks the crafting loop, specifically for heavy armor users. Let's talk about Dragonbone and scale crafting. To make the best armor in the game, you need dragon bones, 15 units each, and dragon scales, 10 units each. A single dragon drops enough bones and scales to fill nearly half your inventory. If you kill a dragon in the wild, you often have to choose, do I take the crafting materials to make the armor I've been dreaming of, or do I keep the potions that are keeping me alive? Often you have to leave the bones of a literal god beast on the side of the road because you simply cannot lift them. It feels anticlimactic. I have slain the World Eater's kin, but alas I have a bad back, so his remains shall stay here. There is a fascinating obscure lore tidbit that rubs salt in this wound. If you read the book The Armourer's Challenge, it details a competition between two smiths to create the finest armour. The winner creates a suit of ebony armour that is described as moving with the wearer, lighter than it appears due to the quality of the joint work. The lore constantly emphasises that masterwork armour feels like a second skin, yet in gameplay, a masterwork ebony cuirass weighs exactly the same as a crude one. The perk system tries to mitigate this with the conditioning perk. Heavy armour weighs nothing when worn. But getting your skill high enough to unlock that perk while struggling with the 150 carry weight cap is a Herculean task. You are suffering for dozens of hours for a quality of life feature that should be standard for a legendary hero. The community has engaged in a fierce debate over this mechanic, the Hoarder versus Realist war. On one side, the Realists argue that it is immersive. Of course you can't carry 10 swords, that's ridiculous. They argue that it forces you to prioritise and plan. On the other side, the loot goblins argue that Skyrim is a game about loot. The dopaminergic loop is kill monster, get shinies. By capping the shinies, you cap the fun. Furthermore, fans point out the logical inconsistencies. You can carry 150 units of weight, but where is it? The Dragonborn has no visible backpack, unless you buy a separate Creation Club item which takes up an armour slot and looks bulky. You are shoving these items into hammer space. If we're accepting that I can hide a greatsword in my pants, why can't I hide two? This weight restriction forces players into a very specific, almost mandatory build path involving the Steed Stone. Located north of Solitude, this standing stone grants Pulse 100 carry weight and makes worn armour weightless. In the base game, it's a nice option. In survival mode, it is essential. It is not a choice, it is a requirement. If you do not have the Steed Stone active, you are playing the game wrong. This kills build diversity. You want to use the Atronach Stone for spell absorption? Too bad, you won't be able to carry your spell tomes. You want the Lord Stone for defense? Hope you like being naked. The meta crystallizes around a single rock in the snow because the inventory penalty is too severe to ignore. And let us not forget the abuse of our followers. Lydia, bless her heart, becomes less of a shield maiden and more of a pack mule. I am sworn to carry your burdens, she sighs, and in survival mode the sarcasm in her voice cuts deeper. You fill her inventory until she physically cannot accept another item. Then you exploit the glitch, or feature, where you drop an item on the ground and order her to pick it up, bypassing her weight limit. You turn the noble housecarls of Skyrim into walking dumpsters, staggering under the weight of 50 Dwemer struts you plan to melt down for ingots. It demeans them. It demeans you. The dungeon loop changes from a continuous adventure to a series of abortive trips. You enter a dwarven ruin like Mzulft. It is massive. In the base game, you clear the whole thing, emerge heavy with loot, and sell it. In survival mode, you clear 2 rooms, fill up, walk all the way back to the entrance, dump the loot in a barrel, hoping it doesn't reset, go back in, clear 2 more rooms, and repeat. You're not an adventurer. You're a logistics manager for a moving company. The pacing of the dungeon is destroyed. You forget why you are there. Was I looking for the Synod researchers, or was I just here to pick up scrap metal? Then there is the cruel irony of quest items. Some quest items have weight. The Elder Scroll itself weighs 20 units. 20 units. That is 13% of your total capacity occupied by a glorified roll of paper you cannot remove from your inventory until the quest is over. If you are juggling the Dawnguard, Dragonborn and main quest lines, your inventory is clogged with black books, Elder Scrolls and mystical tuning forks that you cannot drop. You are being punished for engaging with the story. The hero of prophecy is slowly being crushed by the physical weight of the plot. Even the economy breaks down. Because you can carry less, you sell less. Because you sell less, you have less gold. Because you have less gold, you cannot buy the training or the enchanted gear you need to survive the cold and the hunger. You become a poor hero. You find yourself looking at a merchant's inventory, coveting a ring of squires which increases carry weight, but you can't afford it because you had to leave all the valuable loot in the last dungeon. The carry weight crisis essentially turns Skyrim into a game of inventory management rather than fantasy exploration. You spend your time staring at lists of items, agonizing over whether a 0.5 weight ingredient is worth the space, rather than staring at the horizon. You stop seeing the world as a place of wonder and start seeing it as a collection of heavy objects you're not allowed to touch. It is a simulation of back pain, and frankly, I don't need a video game for that. If the crushing weight of your inventory wasn't enough to make you buckle, the sheer exhaustion of existence surely will. In survival mode, the Dragonborn is apparently narcoleptic. We move from the physical burden of the backpack to the physiological burden of the fatigue mechanic, a system that transforms the legendary saviour of Skyrim into a cranky toddler who desperately needs a nap. In the standard game, sleep is a role-playing choice. You sleep to pass time, to heal instantly, or to gain the well-rested experience bonus. It is a luxury, a way to immerse yourself in the rhythm of the world. In survival mode, sleep is a gun held to your head. The fatigue mechanic operates on a punishingly short timer. After roughly 16 in-game hours, which flies by when you're navigating the labyrinthine corridors of a Dwemer ruin, your character begins to suffer, and the suffering is specific. It targets your magicka. This is the magicka crash. As you get tired, your maximum magicka bar shrinks. The blue bar turns black, just like the health bar does in the cold. For a warrior, this is annoying because you can't cast healing. For a pure mage, this is a death sentence. You're effectively being lobotomized by the Sandman, a powerful wizard, capable of reshaping reality with the arcane arts, suddenly forgets how to cast a simple firebolt because they've been awake for a day and a half. It forces a curfew gameplay style where you're terrified of staying out past sundown, not because of vampires, but because your mana pool will evaporate. Consider the narrative friction this creates. The main quest is built on urgency. The World Eater wakes. You must hurry to the Soul Cairn, stop the Patima resurrection ritual. The NPCs scream at you to run, to hurry, to save them, but survival mode screams, no, go find a bed. Imagine the climax of the main story. You are flying on the back of Odahviing to reach Skuldafn Temple. It is the final push. You land, ready to fight your way to the portal to Sovngarde. But wait, it's been a long flight. The drained icon appears. Your magicka is halved, your stamina regeneration is tanked. You, the Dragonborn, look at the armies of Draugr and dragons guarding the portal and think, you know what? I'm just going to take a quick snooze on this stone slab first. It drains the tension out of the scene faster than a vampire drains a thrall. The problem is exacerbated by the no loitering rule of dungeon design. Most dungeons in Skyrim do not have beds. This is a core in-game fact that you never notice until you need one. Bandit caves have bedrolls, yes, but ancient Nordic tombs, Dwemer ruins, Falmer hives, the undead do not sleep. The machines do not sleep. So you are deep in Blackreach, a massive, sprawling subterranean city that takes hours to explore properly, and you get tired. There is no inn. There is no safe zone. You are miles underground. Your stats are plummeting. You are forced to leave the dungeon, backtrack all the way to the surface, find a bed, sleep, and then clear the enemies, which might have respawned if you took too long, just to get back to where you were. It turns a dungeon delve into a commute, and when you do find a bed in a dungeon, say in a bandit camp you just cleared, the experience is grim. You just slaughtered 6 bandits. Their bodies are still warm, strewn across the floor. The room smells of blood and sweat, and the game mechanic demands you curl up in the bedroll of the man you just decapitated to get your 8 hours. It's macabre in a way the game doesn't acknowledge. You wake up rested next to a corpse. The cognitive dissonance is deafening. There is a fascinating, obscure lore tidbit that makes this forced sleep cycle even more questionable. In the book Walking the World, Vol Apthe, and various texts concerning the Sigic Order, there are mentions of powerful mages using meditation or alchemical trances to bypass the need for mortal sleep, sustaining their consciousness to study the cosmos. The Dragonborn, especially one advanced in the magical arts or possessing the blood of a dragon. Dragons do not sleep in the mortal sense. They meditate on their power words, should theoretically possess some resistance to common fatigue. Furthermore, the Daedric Prince Vermina rules the realm of dreams quagmire. In her quest, Waking Nightmare, we see the physical toll that nightmares take on the people of Dawnstar. Lore-wise, sleep in Skyrim is dangerous. It is where Vermina can touch you. For a hero who fights Daedra, closing one's eyes is a risk. Yet survival mode treats sleep as a safe haven, ignoring the lore implication that the Dreamstride is a realm of horror. Then we have the wait function. In the base game, waiting is a useful tool to skip time for a shop to open or for weather to clear. In survival mode, waiting does not rest you. In fact, it makes you more tired. You stand in one spot for 4 hours waiting for Belethor to unlock his door, and you emerge from that wait exhausted, starving, and freezing. The logic is baffling. Standing still is apparently more calorically expensive and exhausting than sprinting. This removes the utility of the wait function entirely, forcing you to find a bed just to pass time. It turns the simple act of waiting for a quest trigger into a logistical puzzle. The visual representation of fatigue is also aggressive. As you reach the debilitated state, your vision blurs. The colours desaturate, the sound dampens. It simulates the sensation of being drunk or concussed rather than just sleepy. Trying to navigate a trap-filled dungeon with blurry vision is not challenging in a fun way. It is headache-inducing. It is an accessibility nightmare that forces players to stop playing, not because their character needs to sleep, but because the player's eyes hurt from looking at the smeared graphics. Let's talk about the werewolf paradox. This is a point of significant community debate. In the lore and base game mechanics, lycanthropy prevents you from getting the well-rested bonus. The beast blood makes your sleep restless. In survival mode, this penalty remains, but you still must sleep to remove fatigue. So, as a werewolf, you are forced to engage in a mechanic, sleeping, that gives you no buff, only removes a debuff. You're getting all the downtime with none of the benefits. Fans have argued that the beast blood should grant immunity or high resistance to fatigue, the animal instinct keeping you awake and alert. Instead, the ultimate predator of the night gets cranky if they miss their bedtime. The sleep requirement also breaks the flow of the Civil War battles. These are meant to be chaotic, sustained sieges. You're taking Fort Greenwall, the battle rages. Waves of stormcloaks are attacking, and suddenly you yawn. Your magicka drops. You have to leave the siege, find a tent, if you have one, and sleep while the war rages around you. By the time you wake up, the battle state might have glitched, or the immersion is simply shattered. Sorry, General Tullius. You handle the catapults. I need my beauty sleep. The mechanic also fails to account for the elf factor. In many fantasy settings, D&D for example, elves do not sleep, they trance. While the Elder Scrolls lore confirms Mer do sleep, their magical physiology suggests they should have different requirements than a heavy-set Nord. An Altmer mage, bred for magical superiority, succumbing to the same fatigue rate as an Orc Berserker, feels like a missed opportunity for racial diversity in the mechanics. Every race has the exact same battery life. Consider the Innkeeper Waltz. You arrive in a town at 1 AM. You are exhausted. You go to the inn. The innkeeper is asleep. You cannot rent a room because the NPC is in their bed. You can't wake them up to conduct business, usually. So you're stuck in the lobby of the inn, tired, unable to rent the bed that is 5 feet away from you. You have to wait, which makes you more tired or hungry, until 8 AM when they wake up, just so you can pay them 10 gold to go to sleep yourself. It is a bureaucratic loop of misery that highlights the limitations of the AI schedules rather than the harshness of the world. And what of the vampire? The creatures of the night? Survival mode treats them strangely. You are undead. You should not suffer from mortal fatigue in the same way. You are sustained by blood and magic. Yet, the fatigue bar ticks down. A vampire lord, an eternal being of darkness, has to find a coffin or a bed to snooze. The idea of Harkon or Serana needing a nap undermines their threatening aura. The mechanics of survival are tailored for a mortal human, and when applied to the supernatural beings you can become, they feel restrictive and contradictory to the power fantasy. Ultimately, the sleep mechanic in survival mode doesn't make you feel like a survivalist. It makes you feel like a babysitter. You're babysitting your own character. You're constantly checking the clock, not to see if the shops are open, but to calculate if you have enough awake time to clear a dungeon before the debuffs cripple you. The freedom to explore just one more cave is gone, replaced by the responsible, boring necessity of a curfew. The Dragonborn may be the master of the Thuum, but in survival mode they are a slave to the pillow. You wake up from your mandatory 8-hour nap in a dank bandit bedroll expecting to feel refreshed. Instead, you feel a heaviness in your limbs. A cough tickles the back of your throat. You check your active effects and there it is, the red skull icon of doom. Rock Joint. In the vanilla game, Rock Joint is a minor annoyance, a 25% reduction in melee damage that you might not even notice until you check the menu 3 days later. In survival mode, diseases are not just debuffs, they are crippling afflictions that actively try to decommission the Dragonborn. The transition from minor inconvenience to run-ending catastrophe is stark. Diseases in this mode don't just sit there, they fester. If left untreated, they progress, growing in severity over time. What starts as a minor case of bone break fever eventually evolves into a debilitating condition that saps your stamina by massive amounts, effectively rendering you unable to sprint or power attack. You aren't just a hero with a cold, you're a hero whose bones are seemingly turning to glass. Let's look at the shrine tax. This is the core in-game fact that catches every survival mode initiate off guard. In the base game, the Shrines of the Divines are the universal healthcare system of Skyrim. You touch the Shrine of Talos, you hear a nice sound effect, and boom, you're cured of all ailments, free of charge. It is divine grace. In survival mode, the gods apparently developed a need for capitalism. Activating a shrine now requires a donation of gold, usually 100 septims. Now, 100 gold doesn't sound like much to a high-level player, but in the early game, when you are scraping together septims for a spell tome or a steel sword, it is a fortune. You find yourself bargaining with your own health. Do I pay the tax to cure this Witbane so I can regenerate magicka, or do I save the gold for food so I don't starve? It turns religion into a transaction. The benevolent divines who supposedly champion the mortal races are suddenly refusing to bless you unless you slide a coin across the altar. It feels cynical. It feels like the crumbling empire has privatized faith. This leads to the spiral of sickness. Combat in survival mode is already dangerous because of the lack of health regeneration, which we will cover shortly. When you add diseases to the mix, it becomes a death spiral. You get bitten by a wolf, you contract rock joint, your melee damage drops. Because your damage is lower, the next fight against a skeever takes longer. Because it takes longer, this skeever hits you more times. Because it hits you more, you contract ataxia. Now your lockpicking and pickpocketing are ruined. You try to open a chest to find a cure disease potion. You fail because of the ataxia. You have to leave the dungeon. You're weaker, poorer, and sicker than when you entered. The specific diseases seem targeted to dismantle specific playstyles. Witbane is the bane of mages. In vanilla, it's a slow magicka regeneration debuff. In survival, it essentially caps your casting ability. A mage with Witbane is just a person in a robe waving their hands uselessly. Brain rot, contracted from Hagraven traps or similar sources, drains magicka continuously. You are constantly empty. You become a wizard who cannot wizard. The role-playing fantasy is violently interrupted by the biology of a swamp rat. There is an obscure lore tidbit that casts a grim shadow over this mechanic. The Daedric Prince Periite, known as the Taskmaster, is the Lord of Pestilence. His followers believe that disease is a form of order, a way to cull the weak and strengthen the survivors. In the book Reality and Other Falsehoods, there is discussion on how altering reality, magic, and the physical limitations of the mortal form interact. Survival mode essentially turns the entire province of Skyrim into Periite's playground. The Dragonborn, a figure of mythic destiny, is brought low not by Alduin's fire, but by the common flu. It suggests that Periite might be the true winner of the civil war, silently infecting the hero until they are too weak to fight. The scarcity of cure disease potions becomes a major economic factor. In the base game, you hoard them or sell them. In survival mode, they are liquid gold. And here is where the knowledge of alchemy creates a strange metagame. Experienced players know that eating hawk feathers has the same effect as a cure disease potion. The first effect of the ingredient is cure disease. This leads to a bizarre gameplay loop where the Dragonborn spends hours shooting hawks out of the sky over Solitude. You aren't hunting for sport, you are hunting because you have the rattles, and you're too cheap to pay the Shrine of Archay. Picture the scene, the saviour of the world standing on the docks frantically stuffing handfuls of raw bird feathers into their mouth to cure a fever. It is desperate, undignified, and hilarious in the worst way. This disease mechanic also fuels a specific community debate regarding the werewolf-vampire meta. Both lycanthropy and vampirism provide 100% resistance to disease. In the base game, this is a nice perk. In survival mode, it is practically mandatory for a frustration-free experience. Players who have no interest in playing a monster, paladins, vigilant priests, simple hunters, are forced to contract these curses just to avoid the hassle of constant sickness. You become a werewolf not for the power of the beast, but for the immune system. Fans argue that this forces role-playing into a corner. I didn't want to serve Hircine, but I also didn't want to pay 100 gold every time a mudcrab pinched me. The mechanics punish you for remaining human. Traps become infinitely more terrifying. The swinging log trap hurts, yes, but the poison dart trap, that is a nightmare. It applies poison and often disease instantly. In a vanilla dungeon delve, you might trigger a trap, heal, and move on. In survival mode, triggering a trap means you now have a lingering debuff that requires a trip back to town. You develop a paranoia about pressure plates that slows the gameplay to a crawl. You're inching through Bleak Falls Barrow, staring at the floor, terrified of a mechanism that might give you the sniffles. Furthermore, the carry weight issue we discussed earlier compounds this. Cure disease potions weigh 0.5 units. Carrying 10 of them is 5 units of weight. It adds up. You have to balance your medical kit against your loot. Do you carry the cure, or do you risk it? It adds a layer of inventory management that feels more like Resident Evil than high fantasy. The visual feedback for diseases is often subtle until it's too late, but the stat feedback is brutal. You might swing your sword and notice the enemy health bar barely moving. You panic. Did the game glitch? Is this a high-level enemy? No, you just have the droops, a reduction in weapon damage. The game doesn't always scream you are sick in your face. It just quietly nerfs you. You have to constantly check the active effects tab. It breaks the immersion. You are playing the menu, not the game. And let's consider the narrative pacing again. You're on your way to High Hrothgar. You're halfway up the 7,000 steps. A frostwolf bites you. You contract a disease that lowers your stamina. You can no longer sprint. The journey, already tedious due to the cold, becomes a slow, limping trudge. Do you turn back to Ivarstead to pay the shrine? Or do you push on, wheezing and coughing, to meet the greybeards? If you arrive sick, does it ruin the solemnity of the moment? Dragonborn, let us taste of your voice. Wait, are you contagious? Please stand downwind. Even the interactions with NPCs feel strange. You look rather pale, an NPC might say. In vanilla, it's a hint. In survival, it's a diagnosis. But the NPCs themselves never get sick. They live in squalor, in the Ratway, in bandit camps, yet they are paragons of health. The Dragonborn is the only immunocompromised individual in Tamriel. It creates that same feeling of artificiality as the cold mechanic. You are the fragile glass cannon in a world of iron-willed peasants. Ultimately, the disease mechanic in survival mode transforms the heroic fantasy into a struggle against biology. Instead of feeling like a demigod absorbing the souls of dragons, you feel like a frazzled patient in a waiting room, hoping you have enough gold to see the doctor. The epic scale of the conflict, Empire versus Stormcloaks, Dawnguard versus vampires, is overshadowed by the microscopic conflict between your white blood cells and the filth of a skeever's tooth. Alduin can wait. I need a shrine of Kinnereth, and I need it now. We have catalogued the sickness of the body and the heaviness of the pack, but there is one specific item category that deserves its own chapter in this chronicle of misery: ammunition. In the golden days of vanilla Skyrim, The stealth archer was not just a build, it was a way of life. It was the inevitable singularity towards which all character builds eventually gravitated. Why? Because it was efficient, safe, and supported by the fact that you could carry an infinite supply of death in your pocket. You could walk into a barrow with 3,000 iron arrows, enough to blot out the sun, and turn every Draugr into a pincushion without breaking a sweat. Survival mode looks at your quiver and laughs. It introduces a simple, brutal rule. Arrows now have weight, specifically 0.1 units per arrow. Bolts are even heavier. This sounds negligible on paper, a decimal point of a problem, but let's apply the math of the battlefield to this. A standard dungeon run quiver of 100 arrows now weighs 10 units. That is the same weight as a heavy steel shield. If you are the type of player who likes to feel secure with 300 arrows just in case, you're now dedicating 30 units of your precious 150 carry weight capacity solely to ammo. That is 20% of your total existence dedicated to pointed sticks. This fundamentally dismantles the spray and pray archery style. In the base game, you could fire test shots to gauge distance. You could shoot an arrow at a wall to distract an enemy. You could miss. In survival mode, every missed shot is a physical weight lifted from your shoulders, but also a resource wasted that you physically felt carrying. You become miserly with your shots. The thrill of the long-range snipe is replaced by the anxiety of the accountant. If I miss this shot, I have wasted 0.1 weight units of ebony, which costs X gold, and I only have 12 left. The Legolas fantasy, where the hero draws arrows in a fluid, unending stream, is dead. You're now a colonial musket man, counting every ball of lead because you can't carry the crate. This brings us to the tragedy of the crossbow. Introduced in Dawnguard, the crossbow is a powerhouse weapon, designed for armor piercing and stopping power. But the bolts? They are heavy, and the weapon itself is heavy. In survival mode, using a crossbow is a commitment to obesity. You cannot be a nimble vampire hunter. You're a mobile artillery platform that can barely move. The enhanced dwarven crossbow, which ignores 50% of armor, becomes a burden rather than a boon because the ammunition required to sustain a long fight weighs more than the loot you'll get from the vampire you're killing. There is a fascinating loophole here, a core in-game fact that clever wizards exploit, much to the annoyance of traditional rangers, the bound bow spell. This conjuration spell summons a spectral Daedric bow and, crucially, 100 spectral arrows. These arrows are weightless. They exist only for the duration of the spell. This creates a bizarre meta where the best archer in survival mode is not a woodsy hunter with a physical bow, but a high-level wizard. The mage can conjure their ammo out of thin air, bypassing the weight mechanic entirely, while the dedicated archer is hunchbacked under the weight of physical arrows. It invalidates the ranger archetype in favour of the arcane archer, simply because of inventory logistics. Let's touch on an obscure lore tidbit regarding these bound weapons. In the Doors of Oblivion and notes on Daedric's summoning, it is established that bound weapons are actual lesser Daedra, compelled into the shape of a weapon. When you cast Bound Bow, you are essentially holding a demon that has been forced to look like a bow. The arrows are likely extensions of that spirit, so lore-wise it makes sense they are weightless, they are spirits. But gameplay-wise, it creates an imbalance where magic solves a physics problem that skill cannot. The master smith who forges dragonbone arrows is punished by gravity, the novice conjurer is not. The weight of arrows also changes how we loot. In the base game, you loot every arrow from every corpse. It's free money ammo. In survival mode, you have to look at a dead bandit's inventory and say, no. You leave the iron arrows, you leave the steel arrows, you only take the glass or ebony. You become an ammo snob out of necessity. But this creates a problem when you run out of the good stuff. You are deep in a Dwemer ruin, you've fired your last ebony arrow, and now you have to backtrack to scour the corpses of the Felmer for their crude, heavy chorus arrows just to have something to shoot. It is a walk of shame. And what happens when you run out completely? In vanilla, this rarely happens. In survival, it is a constant threat. You are fighting a dragon. It is circling overhead. You reach for an arrow and grasp air. You forgot to restock in town because the arrows were too heavy to stockpile. Now, you have to switch to melee. But you are a stealth Archie. You are wearing light armor. You have a dagger. The dragon lands and breathes fire. You die. The resource starvation leads to a combat failure state that feels less like a lack of skill and more like a lack of pocket space. This mechanic also impacts the follower turret strategy. Many players give their follower a single high-quality arrow, a Daedric arrow for instance, and a good bow. In vanilla, the follower has infinite ammo of that type. In survival mode, followers track arrow usage. Well, the mechanics here can be inconsistent depending on the patch and follower, but generally if you load Lydia up with arrows, she is now over-encumbered too. She can't carry your dragon bones because she's carrying the munitions for the siege of Whiterun. The community has long debated the realism versus fun curve of this specific feature. Fans argue that if we're going for realism, a quiver physically cannot hold 100 arrows. It would be bulky and awkward. A real archer carries maybe 20-30 arrows. Survival mode sits in an unhappy middle ground. It lets you carry 100 but punishes you for it with weight. It doesn't restrict the count for realism, i.e. a hard cap on quiver size. It just makes the arrows heavy. It turns a tactical restriction into a math problem. It doesn't make you feel like a resourceful survivor. It makes you feel like a pack mule. Then there is the visual disconnect. You equip 10 arrows or 100 arrows, the quiver on your back looks the same. The game demands you manage the weight of individual shafts of wood and metal, but provides no visual feedback on your dwindling supply, other than a number in a menu. You have to constantly pause the combat, open the inventory and check your arrow count. Do I have enough for this centurion? Pause, scroll, check, resume. The flow of the battle is broken by the inventory screen. Ultimately, the weight of ammunition attacks the most satisfying feedback loop in Skyrim, the thwip-thunk of a long-range stealth kill. It adds attacks to every shot. It makes you hesitate. And in a game about being a legendary hero, hesitation is the enemy of fun. You aren't the eagle-eyed sniper of the wilds. You're a logistics manager wondering if that bandit is worth the 0.1 units of weight it will take to kill him. Usually the answer is no, so you just sneak past, leaving the world unsaved, one heavy arrow at a time. The arrows are heavy, your back is breaking and you are tired. But surely if you take a few hits in combat, you can just crouch behind a rock for a moment and catch your breath, right? The red bar will slide back up, and you can jump back into the fray. Wrong. In survival mode, the Wolverine factor is gone. Health regeneration is completely disabled. This is the most jarring combat alteration for a modern gamer. We are conditioned by decades of shooters and RPGs to expect out-of-combat regeneration. You hide, you heal. In survival mode, if you lose 50 health fighting a wolf, that 50 health is gone forever, or until you consume resources to get it back. Your health bar becomes a permanent record of your failures. You're walking around Skyrim constantly at 70% health, 40% health, terrifyingly close to death, simply because you don't want to waste a potion. The potion chugging becomes the primary gameplay loop. In the base game, potions are panic buttons. In survival mode, they are water. You drink them constantly. This ties back to the weight issue. You need hundreds of minor healing potions to sustain a long journey, but potions have weight, 0.5, so you're carrying 50 pounds of red liquid. The sound of the cork popping becomes the soundtrack of your adventure. You aren't shouting Fusroda, you're shouting glug glug glug. This mechanic creates a massive dependency on the Restoration School of Magic. In vanilla Skyrim, you can play a barbarian who hates magic and never casts a spell. In survival mode, that barbarian is a dead man walking. You must learn healing. You must learn fast healing. You find yourself hiding in a corner after every single skirmish, dual casting healing hands on yourself like a desperate paladin, watching the blue magicka bar drain to fill the red health bar. It forces every character build to be a spell sword or a paladin. The purity of the magic-hating Nord roleplay is destroyed by the necessity of magical healthcare. Core in-game fact: the respite perk in the restoration tree becomes the most valuable perk in the game. It allows healing spells to restore stamina. Since you can't regen health, and hunger kills your stamina, this perk is the only thing keeping you mobile. A warrior without restoration is just a stationary target. This creates a homogenization of builds. Everyone ends up sneaking, everyone ends up using restoration, and everyone ends up wearing heavy armor for warmth. The diversity of the play your way promise evaporates. Let's discuss the food for health fallacy. In the absence of regen, food can restore health, but look at the values. A cabbage restores 1 point of health. You have 300 health. To heal from a near-death experience, you would need to eat 280 cabbages. The visual image of the Dragonborn unhinging their jaw to consume a cartload of produce in the middle of a dungeon is absurd. Yet you do it. You hoard cheese wheels not for the memes, but because they are poor man's potions. You open the menu and spam the eat button on 50 apples. It is tedious. It is silly. It is survival. There is a fan theory and community debate regarding the racial passives here. Argonians have the hist skin ability. Once a day, they regenerate health 10 times faster. In survival mode, this ability is god tier. It is the only time you feel like a normal video game character. Fans argue that orcs, berserker rage, or Nords, hardy constitution, should have some passive trickle of regen. The fact that a legendary hero heals slower than a standard troll, which has massive regen, feels insulting. The community often points out, why does the troll get to regenerate in survival mode but I don't? The enemies play by vanilla rules, you play by hardcore rules. This lack of regeneration also ruins the traps dynamic. In vanilla, running through a swinging blade trap is a whoops moment. You wait a few seconds, you heal. In survival mode, it is a resource drain. If you are clumsy, you are punished not just with damage, but with the economic cost of the potion you now have to drink. It makes you overly cautious. You move through dungeons at a snail's pace, checking every floor tile. It slows the game down from an action RPG to a paranoia simulator. Consider the vampire lord and werewolf forms again. When you transform, you lose access to your inventory, potions, and your restoration magic. In vanilla, you rely on the passive regeneration or feeding to stay alive. In survival mode, if you transform and take heavy damage, you are in trouble. You can feed on corpses to heal, as a werewolf vampire. But if there are no corpses, say fighting a dragon or a centurion, you have no way to heal. You are a giant, powerful monster that is slowly being whittled down, unable to pop a potion. The power form becomes a liability. You are safer in human form where you can chug potions. Then there is the Ring of Namira. An obscure lore tidbit and item, this Daedric artifact allows you to feed on corpses to gain health and regeneration. In survival mode, this ring moves from creepy roleplay item to essential survival gear. The game pushes you towards cannibalism. To survive the harsh wilderness, you find yourself eating the bandits you kill because it is the most efficient way to heal without using potions. The mechanics unintentionally incentivize the darkest possible moral choices just to maintain a health bar. I didn't want to be a cannibal, but the game mechanics gave me no choice. The wait to heal strategy is also dead. In vanilla, you press wait 1 hour and you are fully healed. In survival, as we established, waiting makes you hungry and tired and does not heal you. You cannot rest your wounds away. This removes the easiest pacing tool the player had. You have to actively manage your recovery. The visual feedback of low health, the heartbeat sound, the red tint, becomes a constant companion, because you don't want to waste a potion to top off that last 10% of health. You walk around constantly injured. You get used to the injured animation state. The Dragonborn spends the entire game clutching their side, groaning. It's depressing. Ultimately, the removal of health regeneration turns combat into a math equation of health points versus potion weight. It discourages experimentation. You don't try to parry the giant's club. You cheese him with arrows from a ledge because you can't afford the health loss. You don't charge into the bandit camp, you snipe. It forces a cowardly conservative playstyle that contradicts the bold Nord hero aesthetic the game tries to sell. You survive, yes, but you don't feel like a warrior. You feel like a haemophiliac in a world of sharp edges. The sun is setting over the tundras of Whiterun. The temperature is plummeting. The wind is picking up and the freezing icon is pulsing with a rhythmic, threatening beat. You are miles from the nearest inn. Your health bar is turning black. Panic sets in. But wait, you prepared for this. You're a survivalist. You open your inventory and deploy your secret weapon, the camping supply kit. In theory, the addition of camping to Skyrim is a dream come true. It fulfills the ranger fantasy. The solitary wanderer pitching a tent under the stars, roasting rabbit over an open fire. In practice, the camping supply kit is one of the most bafflingly designed items in the history of the Creation Club, primarily because it operates on the logic of a disposable wet wipe, rather than a piece of survival equipment. Let's start with the physical reality of the kit. The camping supplies item weighs a staggering 9 units. In a world where your carry weight is capped at 150, this single item occupies 6% of your entire inventory capacity. Carrying a tent is the equivalent of carrying 2 greatswords. It is a massive investment of space, so you trudge through the snow, your back aching under the weight of this portable home, comforted by the knowledge that you have a safety net. You find a flat patch of ground. We'll get to the flat requirement in a moment. You deploy the kit. A fire pit and a small tent materialize. You warm your hands, you sleep, you survive the night. Morning comes, the sun rises, you pack up your gear, ready to leave, and then you realize you can't pack up the tent. The camping supply kit is single use. Read that again. Single use. The Dragonborn, a master craftsman capable of forging Daedric armor and constructing entire manor houses from scratch, apparently does not know how to fold a piece of canvas. Once you pitch that tent, it belongs to the land. You have to leave it there. This transforms the camping mechanic into an environmental disaster. By the end of a long playthrough, the wilderness of Skyrim is littered with hundreds of abandoned campsites, abandoned like the shells of some giant wasteful snail. You're not a ranger, you're a litterbug. This mechanic forces a ridiculous economic loop. Because you cannot repack your camp, you have to carry multiple kits if you plan on a long journey. If you're travelling from Riften to Solitude, you might need 3 or 4 camps. That is 27 to 36 units of weight, a third of your inventory, dedicated to disposable architecture. You're effectively carrying a lumber yard on your back. Core in-game, fact. To craft a camping supply kit, you need firewood and leather. Firewood is heavy. Leather requires hunting. If you run out of kits in the wild, you have to scramble to find a woodcutter's axe, which has weight. Find a chopping block, which are only in towns or specific camps. Chop the wood, hunt a wolf, tan the hide, and then craft the kit at a forge or anvil. Wait, you can't craft the kit in the wild because you need a forge to make the kit that allows you to survive in the wild. The circular logic is maddening. You cannot just gather sticks and make a lean-to. You need a pre-packaged industrial product. Then there is the placement dance. The camping supply kit is notoriously finicky about where it can be placed. The ground must be perfectly flat. In a province defined by its jagged mountains, rocky crags and rolling hills, finding a flat 10x10 foot square is harder than finding a virtuous Thalmor. You find yourself frantically clicking the use button while running in circles, watching the error message, "You cannot place that here" flash on the screen while you slowly freeze to death. It breaks the immersion completely. You are dying of hypothermia, but the game won't let you build a fire because the ground has a 2-degree incline. The mobile home myth is further shattered by the lack of utility within the camp itself. The camp provides a bed and a fire. That's it. There is no cooking pot in the basic kit, unless you have the specific camping creation upgraded or modded, but the base survival implementation is bare bones. So you can sleep and get warm, but you cannot cook the raw meat you're carrying to stop the hunger. You're sitting by a warm fire, starving to death, holding a raw leg of goat that you cannot eat because you didn't bring a cast iron pot, which weighs even more. The synergy between the hunger, cold, and camping mechanics is non-existent. They feel like 3 separate systems that were never introduced to each other. There is a fan theory and community debate that rages around this. The Creation Club versus Frostfall war. Long before survival mode was official, the mod Campfire existed. In Campfire, you could build a fire, add a cooking pot, set up a tent, sleep, and then pack it all back up. You could upgrade your gear. It had a skill tree. It was a lifestyle. The official survival mode camping feels like a cheap knockoff of the community's work. Fans argue that Bethesda essentially looked at the popular mod, stripped out all the depth and utility, kept the weight penalty and sold it back to us. The fact that you cannot reuse the tent is the primary sticking point. It defies all logic of wilderness survival. Consider the Khajiit caravans. These travelling merchants set up camps outside the major cities. Their tents are elaborate, filled with rugs and goods. They pack them up and move. The Dragonborn can speak to Risad or Ma'ik the Liar, observe their nomadic lifestyle, and yet is incapable of replicating it. An obscure lore tidbit from Azir Trajijazeri speaks of the Khajiit philosophy of non-attachment to material things, but even they don't throw away their tents every morning. The Dragonborn seems to have taken the concept of letting go to a pathological extreme. The kit also lacks any defensive utility. You set up camp in the wild, you sleep, you wake up. There is a bear in your tent. The camp offers no safety, no alarm system, no barriers. In other survival games, building a camp is about claiming a safe zone. In Skyrim, it's just a bedroll with a roof. You're just as vulnerable sleeping in your 9-unit tent as you're sleeping on the dirt. The beacon of shame. Because the camps are permanent fixtures in the world, they eventually become markers of your failures. You walk past a campsite near Winterhold and remember, "Ah, yes, That is where I almost froze to death and had to drop my Dragonborn shield to make room for this tent. They clutter the landscape. The pristine wilderness is marred by your trail of discarded canvas. Furthermore, the fire in the camp eventually goes out, but the camp stays, so you have a cold, unlit fire pit and a tent you can't use, because you're not tired anymore or you need to move on. It becomes a useless geometry object that you can collide with. It is essentially litter. The Dragonborn is polluting Tamriel. The weight management aspect of the kit forces you to make absurd choices. You are deep in a dungeon. You find a glass sword. You are over-encumbered. You look at your inventory. The only thing heavy enough to drop to make room for the sword is your camping kit. If you drop it, you might freeze on the way home. If you keep it, you leave the loot. You drop the kit. You exit the dungeon. A blizzard strikes. You regret everything. The item is too heavy to carry just in case, but too essential to leave behind. It creates a paralysis of preparation. Ultimately, the camping supply kit represents everything wrong with survival mode's design philosophy. It adds inconvenience without adding depth. It mimics the aesthetic of survival, the visual of the campfire, without understanding the mechanics of it. A real survivor cherishes their gear, maintains it, and packs it efficiently. Survival mode forces you to treat survival gear like a fast food wrapper. You consume the camp and move on, leaving a mess behind you, poorer and heavier for the effort. Having abandoned your single-use tent in the snow like a shameful secret, you might think the solution to this endless cycle of freezing and starving is to transcend mortality altogether. Why suffer the weaknesses of the flesh when you can become a creature of the night? You decide to contract Sanguinara Vampiris. You envision yourself as a powerful, immortal lord of shadows, immune to the petty needs of men. You are wrong. In survival mode, becoming a vampire does not free you from the grocery run. It just makes your dietary restrictions weirder. Welcome to the indignity of the undead hunger pangs. In a standard playthrough, vampirism is a trade-off of power for sunlight weakness. In survival mode, it is an administrative nightmare. The primary issue is that the game mechanics struggle to decide if you're a mystical predator or just a guy with a skin condition. You still have a hunger bar, and while feeding on the blood of sleeping victims does satisfy this hunger, the opportunities to do so are often rare in the deep wilderness. So what happens when Lord Harkon's chosen champion gets peckish in the middle of a Dwemer ruin? They eat a potato. There is no sight more damaging to the gothic horror aesthetic than a vampire lord, in full royal armour, pausing in the middle of a slaughter to hastily consume 3 wheels of Edar cheese and a seared slaughter fish. The mechanic forces you to rely on mortal food because blood sources, sleeping NPCs, are not available in dungeons. You become a lunchbox vampire. You're an apex predator who has to pack a sack lunch. The terrifying creature of the night is effectively defeated by a lack of snacks. This brings us to the sunlight starvation loop. We know that in the daylight, vampires do not regenerate health, magicka, or stamina. Survival mode compounds this by adding the hunger debuff, which also caps your total stamina and reduces attack speed. When you combine the two, a hungry vampire in the sun is roughly as threatening as a wet mud crab. You have 0 regeneration and a tiny pool of resources. You take one step, swing your sword once, and then you have to stand there, panting, waiting for the sun to go down or for your character to digest the venison chop you just ate. It turns the powerful daywalker fantasy into a nap-taker reality. Let's examine the cold interaction again, because for vampires, it is particularly insulting. Vampires are undead. Their bodies are room temperature. They are animated corpses. Logically, and according to most fantasy tropes, cold should be irrelevant to them. They sleep in stone coffins in damp crypts. Yet, in survival mode, vampires can freeze to death. In fact, without the proper warmth rating from armor, a vampire will freeze just as fast as a mortal. This leads to the absurdity of a vampire lord freezing to death while hovering. You are a magical being of pure dominance, yet you are shivering because you forgot your scarf. There is an obscure lore tidbit that makes this mechanic's clash even more painful. The book Vampires of the Iliac Bay, which appears in Daggerfall and subsequent lore discussions, and Immortal Blood describe the Cyrodiilic and Skyrim vampires. The Volkihar clan of Skyrim is specifically noted for living under the ice of frozen lakes, reaching up to pull victims down. They are creatures of the ice. The lore explicitly states they thrive in the freezing depths. Yet if you, a member of this clan, try to swim in that same frozen lake in survival mode, you will die in seconds. The game mechanics actively contradict the specific lore of the faction you have joined. You are a Volkihar who is allergic to the Volkihar lifestyle. This contradiction fuels a massive community debate. The metabolism argument. Fans have argued for years that the hunger bar for vampires should be exclusively tied to blood. If you don't drink blood, you get weaker or stronger, depending on the vanilla mechanics. But you shouldn't die of starvation or need sweet rolls. The community modding scene fixed this almost immediately, making vampires immune to cold and dependent only on blood. But the official survival mode insists on this hybrid existence where you're half monster, half gourmand. Consider the Potion of Blood. Introduced in Dawnguard, this item allows you to feed on the go. In survival mode, you would think this is the solution. However, the availability of these potions is limited to Castle Volkihar. If you are exploring the Reach or the Rift, you cannot just pop to the castle to restock. You are tethered to the castle in a way that feels restrictive rather than thematic, and if you run out, you're back to raiding bandit campfires for vegetable soup. Then there is the issue of the beast form, Vampire Lord. When you transform into the Vampire Lord, you lose your armor rating, mostly, and your warmth rating. You're essentially naked. If you transform to fight a dragon on a snowy peak, you might win the fight but die immediately after from exposure because your demon form has no insulation. The ultimate power fantasy, revealing your true form, becomes a suicide pact with the weather. You have to calculate, can I kill this boss before I freeze solid? The coffin problem also arises. Survival mode requires you to sleep to manage fatigue. Vampires get a bonus for sleeping in a coffin, but coffins are only found in vampire lairs and the Hall of the Dead. If you are out adventuring, you have to sleep in a normal bed or a tent. Sleeping in a tent under the sun, even if inside, feels wrong for a vampire. You want the dark, damp earth. The game forces you to roleplay a camper rather than a monster. Even the social stealth aspect is ruined. In lore, Cyrodiilic vampires are masters of blending in. They eat and drink at banquets to maintain the masquerade, even if the food turns to ash in their mouths. In survival mode, you aren't eating to blend in. You are eating because you have to. It strips the agency from the act. You aren't a clever spy feigning mortality. You are a slave to a mortal metabolism you should have shed centuries ago. Ultimately, playing a vampire in survival mode highlights the mode's lack of nuance. It applies a blanket set of rules, cold, hunger, fatigue, to every entity, regardless of what they are. It fails to account for the supernatural nature of the Dragonborn's transformations. Instead of feeling like a predator stalking the night, you feel like a sickly, high-maintenance goth who complains about the draft and needs a snack every 20 minutes. The immortality you sought is just a longer, colder life of menu management. You have survived the vampires, the diseases, and the indignity of carrying your own bed. You are ready to advance the main plot. The Greybeards have summoned you. You stand at the bridge in Ivarstead, looking up at the throat of the world. In the base game, the climb up the 7,000 steps is a rite of passage, a single atmospheric ascent that serves as a tutorial for the scale of the game. You climb it once, unlock the fast travel marker, and for the rest of the game, you visit the monks of the Thuum via teleportation. In survival mode, however, the 7,000 steps become the 7,000 chores, and you will come to memorize every single cracked paving stone on that miserable path. The sheer repetition of this climb is the single greatest pacing killer in the main quest line. The Greybeards are the primary quest givers for the first act. They need to speak to you often. Go retrieve the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. Climb down, walk to the swamp, get the horn, walk back, climb up. Go learn this word of power. Climb down, walk to the word wall, walk back, climb up. We need to hold a peace council. Climb down, walk to Solitude and Windhelm, walk back, climb up. Without fast travel, the throat of the world stops being a majestic spiritual sanctuary and starts feeling like a 5th-floor walk-up apartment in a building with no elevator. You begin to resent the Greybeards, not for their passive philosophy, but for their geographical inconvenience. You find yourself shouting at the screen, "You are masters of the voice. Can't you just whisper the location of the next shout into my ear from the balcony? Do I really need to come up there for a 30-second conversation?" Let's talk about the weather on the mountain. As we established, altitude equals cold. High Hrothgar is naturally very high. This means that every single meeting with the Greybeards is a race against hypothermia. The moment you pass the emblem Phi or V, the wind picks up. By the time you reach the Frost Troll, we'll get to him, you're freezing. By the time you reach the doors of the monastery, you're often in the critical stages of freezing death. Core in-game. Fact: the courtyard of High Hrothgar is where the Greybeards teach you the whirlwind sprint and clear skies shouts. These tutorials require you to stand outside and listen to them pontificate slowly. Breathe. Focus. Arngeir drones on. Meanwhile, your health bar is turning black. You are literally dying of exposure while the old man lectures you on patience. You have to interrupt the lesson to run inside the temple to warm up, then run back out, missing the dialogue. It turns a solemn, mystical training montage into a frantic game of musical chairs, where the music is the wind and the chair is a fire pit. And then there is the Frost Troll, the infamous guardian of the path. In vanilla Skyrim, he is a difficulty spike. In survival mode, he is a run-ender, because you cannot regenerate health and likely have some lingering fatigue or hunger debuffs from the climb. You reach the troll in a weakened state. If he kills you, you respawn at the last bed you slept in, which was likely in Ivarstead. You have to do the entire climb again. The punishment for failure is not just reloading a save, it is repeating 20 minutes of holding the W key. It creates a level of frustration that encourages cheese tactics. You don't fight the troll, you clamber up the rocks on the side of the path, glitching your way past him, breaking the immersion to save your sanity. There is an obscure lore tidbit found in the emblems etched along the path. Reading all 10 gives you the Voice of the Sky effect, which prevents animals from attacking you for 24 hours. In the lore, this pilgrimage is described as a supreme test of faith. Klimek, the grocer in Ivarstead, mentions he isn't sure his legs can make the journey again. The lore implies this is a once-in-a-lifetime event for most Nords. The Dragonborn, however, is forced to treat this sacred pilgrimage like a daily commute. The narrative weight of the journey evaporates when you're doing it for the 5th time in a week because you forgot to bring the horn. This constant backtracking highlights a specific flaw in the Peace Council quest, Season Unending. If you haven't finished the Civil War, you have to organise a truce. This involves travelling to Solitude to talk to Tullius, then Windhelm to talk to Ulfric, then back to High Hrothgar to tell Arngeir they agreed, then back to the leaders to tell them the location, then back to High Hrothgar for the meeting. In survival mode, this single quest can take 4 to 5 hours of real-time walking. It is excruciating. You are a glorified diplomat with a stamina problem. The urgency of the dragon threat is completely lost in the endless trudge across the tundra. The community has long engaged in a debate regarding the Greybeard courier service. Fans ask, why doesn't Parthenax just send a dragon to pick me up? Or, why isn't there a secret tunnel? The lack of a fast travel alternative for the central hub of the game's lore is baffling in a survival context. In Morrowind there were Silt Striders and Mages Guild teleports. Here, the most powerful beings in the world who can shout the sky clear, force their saviour to walk up a freezing staircase repeatedly. It feels like hazing. Furthermore, the supplies issue becomes critical here. High Hrothgar has no merchant. There is no blacksmith. There is no alchemy table you can easily access without stealing, and even then supplies are limited. If you arrive at the top and realise you're out of food or arrows, you are stranded. You have to go all the way back down to Ivarstead to restock, then climb all the way back up. A simple inventory mistake cost you an hour of gameplay. The monastery feels less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. The climb also exposes the horse physics limitation again. Because the path is winding and long, many players try to take a horse, but the frost troll often kills the horse, or the horse glitches on the geometry. And now you have a dead horse on the holy mountain and you are walking. The verticality of the world, usually a strength, becomes a weakness when traversal is this slow. Consider the clear skies shout. You learn it to reach the throat of the world proper, to meet Parthenax. The path from the monastery to the summit is choked with magical wind that deals damage and freezes you. You have to shout to clear it. In survival mode, this section is a nightmare of resource management. The cold is extreme, often maxing out the debuff instantly. You are shouting, running, freezing, and eating soup simultaneously. Meeting the leader of the Greybeards, the ancient master of the Way of the Voice, should be a moment of awe. Instead, you stumble onto the summit half dead, your vision blurred by the fatigue mechanic, frantically looking for a fire source before you even look at the dragon. Parthenax starts talking about the nature of power, and you are just thinking, please, shut up and breathe fire on me, I'm cold. The High Hrothgar hike essentially acts as a deterrent to playing the main story. You find yourself doing anything else to avoid that climb. Maybe I'll go join the Bard's College. Maybe I'll collect Nirnroot. You procrastinate saving the world because the commute to the quest giver is too annoying. The core loop of the narrative, returning to your mentors for guidance, is broken by the sheer tedium of the journey. The 7,000 steps aren't a test of character, they are a test of your patience with the game's walking animation. The wind howls through the mountain pass, drowning out the sound of your own footsteps. You are freezing, hungry, and burdened with the weight of dragon bones. You turn around to check on your faithful companion, the one person sworn to carry your burdens and watch your back. But the road behind you is empty. Lydia is gone. In the vanilla game, this is a momentary blip. You fast travel to the next city, and she magically materializes next to you, ready to block a doorway. In survival mode, however, a missing follower is a logistical crisis that can derail your entire evening. The artificial intelligence of Skyrim's followers was never designed for a no-fast travel environment. It relies heavily on the teleport catch-up mechanic to gloss over its pathfinding failures. When you remove that safety net, you're left with the raw, unpolished reality of 2011 navigational logic. Your followers do not see the world as you do. They see a mesh of walkable nodes, and they are prone to getting confused by complex geometry like a small rock or a knee-high fence. Consider the stuck state. You're traversing the rocky crags of the Reach. You jump down a small ledge, a shortcut that saves 10 minutes of walking. You land safely. You turn around. Lydia is standing on the ledge above, staring at you. She cannot jump. Her pathfinding node tells her the drop is too steep. She calculates a new route, a 3-mile detour back through a forsworn camp to reach the bottom of the cliff. You have 2 choices: stand there in the freezing rain and wait for 20 minutes while she navigates the long way around, risking her death and the loss of your loot, or backtrack, climb up, and gently guide her down a safer slope like you're herding a toddler. This leads to the elevator paradox. Dwemer ruins are notorious for this. You take a lift to the surface, you load into the world, you're alone. Your follower didn't make the transition. In the base game, you just pop to the map and travel. Here, you have to go back down the elevator, run through the ruin to find where they got stuck, and try to nudge them into the lift trigger zone. It is tedious. It is frustrating. It breaks the illusion of the partnership. You aren't a leader of heroes. You're a chaperone for a confused tourist. Core in-game. Fact: followers in Skyrim trigger tripwires. They do not have the stealth perks you have. You, the master thief, carefully navigate around a pressure plate in a Nordic barrow. You breathe a sigh of relief. Then you hear the heavy clank of steel boots behind you. Click. The swinging spiked wall slams into your back. In survival mode, this isn't just damage. It's a high probability of contracting a disease or getting an injury debuff. Your companion is actively hazardous to your health. A stealth playthrough with a companion becomes impossible because their incompetence carries a heavy medical bill. There is a community debate that rages around the Serana issue. Serana, the vampire daughter of Cold Harbor, is a fan favourite for her unique dialogue and interaction sandbox. However, her AI is notoriously active. She likes to wander off to use workbenches or sit in chairs. In survival mode, this is a nightmare. You turn around to leave a dungeon, and she is gone. She's busy mining ore 3 rooms back. You have to physically go retrieve her. The community often jokes that Serana is the true main character, and you are just following her. But in survival, this quirk turns into a game of hide and seek, where the prize is not freezing to death waiting for her to finish hammering a breastplate. The combat desync is another source of agony. You're running from a fight you can't win, perhaps a snowy saber cat that is too high level. You sprint, you escape, you hide. But the combat music doesn't stop. Why? Because your follower decided to stand their ground 3 miles back. They are currently fighting the cat. You cannot rest. You cannot sleep. You cannot wait. The game considers you in combat because your follower is in combat. You're held hostage by their bravery stupidity. You have to run all the way back, kill the cat, or watch your follower go down to one knee, and then drag them away. Let's touch on an obscure lore tidbit regarding the Oath of the Housecarl. In the book Effect of the Elder Scrolls, a bit meta, but bear with me, and dialogues with the Jarls, it is implied that a housecarl is bound by a sacred honour to protect the Thane with their life. It is a bond of blood and soul. Yet, the AI behaviour often suggests a bond of mild indifference. If you get stuck in a river current and swept downstream, your housecarl will often just watch you float away, then slowly walk along the bank at a leisurely pace. The disconnect between the fierce loyalty described in the lore and the pathfinding apathy is jarring. I am sworn to carry your burdens, eventually, if I can figure out how to get around this tree. The torch problem also arises. Some followers use torches. In the dark nights of survival mode, especially with lighting mods that often accompany such playthroughs, you rely on them. But their torch logic is flawed. They will equip a torch while sneaking, giving away your position. Or they will unequip it in the pitch black to pull out a two-handed weapon, leaving you blind. You find yourself micromanaging their inventory, taking their torch away like a parent confiscating a toy, just to maintain tactical control. Then there is the corpse lost and found. If a follower dies in survival mode, and they can if they are not essential, or if you accidentally hit them in the chaos, their body stays where it fell. If they were carrying the Dragonstone, or your spare camping kit, or the unique weapon you gave them, that loot is now stranded in the wilderness, without a map marker for last death, and without fast travel to retrace your steps quickly. Finding a dead follower in the vast white snowscape of the Pale is nearly impossible. You lose not just a friend, but a walking treasury. The doorway blockade is the classic Skyrim meme, but in survival mode it is lethal. You're in a small room, you're freezing. There is a fire in the next room, you try to leave. Lydia is in the doorway. "Honoured to see you again, my Thane." She won't move. You sprint into her. She doesn't budge. You shout at her. Nothing. You're trapped in the cold zone by your own bodyguard. In a mode where positioning and movement are key to survival, having a solid physical object that follows you around and randomly blocks your path is a liability. Ultimately, survival mode teaches you a hard lesson. It is better to be alone. The extra carry weight a follower provides is negated by the time you waste managing their pathfinding. The combat support they offer is negated by the traps they trigger. You start to leave them at home. The Dragonborn becomes a solitary hermit, not out of stoicism, but out of an unwillingness to deal with the AI's inability to navigate a staircase. You wander the wastes alone, because at least when you are alone, the only idiot you have to worry about is yourself. So, you've abandoned your companions, discarded your tent, and you are wandering the wilds alone. But you're not just a wanderer. You're the Dragonborn. You have a destiny. The Elder Scrolls themselves have foretold your coming. The World Eater Alduin has returned to swallow the Kalpa and end the current timeline of existence. The stakes could not possibly be higher. And yet here you are, standing knee-deep in the freezing waters of the Karth River, holding a fishing rod, praying for a spadefish to bite so you don't starve to death before you reach Skyhaven Temple. This is the ultimate narrative fracture of survival mode, the clash between cosmic urgency and mundane tedium. The main quest of Skyrim is written as a breathless race against time. From the moment the first dragon attacks Helgen, the narrative drumbeat is constant. Warn the Jarl! Find the stone! Kill the dragon! Find the Thalmor intel! Trap Oda Viing! The characters scream at you to hurry. Delphine, the intense and paranoid Grandmaster of the Blades, is constantly tapping her foot, demanding you meet her now at Kynesgrove or Riverwood. But survival mode grabs this urgency by the throat and strangles it. You simply cannot hurry. It is physically impossible. When Delphine says, "We have to get to Kynesgrove before Alduin resurrects Saloknir," she implies a sprint. In the base game, you fast travel or ride hard. In survival mode, you have to look at her and say, "Okay, but first I need to sleep for 8 hours because I'm drained. Then I need to cook 6 vegetable soups, and then I need to walk there, which will take 2 days, so hopefully Alduin is also on a coffee break. The tension of the story evaporates. You arrive at the dragon burial mound 3 days late, yet the script waits for you. Alduin is hovering there, politely pausing his resurrection shout until you enter the trigger zone. The disconnect between the narrative's screaming demand for speed and the gameplay's punishing requirement for slowness turns the epic plot into a farce. You aren't chasing the villain. You're getting around to him eventually, weather permitting. Core in-game fact. Consider the quest, the World Eater's Eyrie. You must ride Odahviing to Skuldafn, a temple high in the mountains that is only accessible by flight. This is a point of no return. Once you get on that dragon, you're in Skuldafn and then Sovngarde. There are no shops. There are no beds, safe ones anyway. There is no turning back. In the base game, this is a thrilling climax. In survival mode, it is a logistical terror. If you get on that dragon without a backpack full of food, potions and camping supplies, you are soft-locking your game. You will starve in the afterlife. The heroic leap of faith becomes an inventory checklist. Do I have my keys, wallet, phone, 10 pounds of seared slaughterfish? This leads to the fishing pole paradox. With the anniversary edition, fishing was added to the game. In survival, fishing is a legitimate way to get food. But the visual of the Dragonborn fishing is inherently relaxed. It is a leisure activity. Doing it while the sky is literally darkening with the threat of the apocalypse creates a tonal whiplash that is hard to ignore. You are standing on the banks of Lake Ilinalta, the water reflecting the ominous dark clouds of a dragonstorm, and you are excitedly reeling in a carp. It feels like the hero has checked out. Let the world burn, I have a collection to complete. There is an obscure lore tidbit that makes this delay even more egregious. The concept of the Kalpa in Nordic and metaphysical lore suggests that time is cyclical. Alduin's role is to eat the world so the next one can begin. Technically, by delaying, you're prolonging the suffering of a dying world. The Greybeards allude to this. Ungear questions if the world should be saved. But the urgency comes from the idea that Alduin has forsaken his role and is trying to dominate the world instead of eating it. He is a tyrant now. Every second you waste roasting a rabbit is a second under his tyranny. The lore demands action. The gameplay demands a nap. This creates a pervasive side quest guilt. In a normal RPG, we joke about ignoring the main quest to do side content. In survival mode, ignoring the main quest is mandatory for survival. You cannot rush the main quest because you are too weak and poor. You have to do side jobs, chopping wood, delivering letters, clearing bandit camps, just to afford the supplies to do the main job. You become a gig economy hero. You save the world in your spare time, between shifts at the lumber mill. The community has long debated the ludonarrative dissonance of open-world games, but survival mode amplifies it to a deafening roar. Fans argue that a true survival story should integrate the urgency. Imagine if Alduin's presence actually made the world colder. If the survival mechanics were tied to the villain, instead they are parallel lines that never meet. The cold is just weather. It doesn't care about the dragons. The hunger is just biology. The narrative stakes feel completely divorced from the moment-to-moment gameplay. Consider the Civil War questline again. You're tasked with delivering the jagged crown. General Tullius or Ulfric says, "Take this to the Jarl immediately, it will secure his claim." Immediately, in survival mode, means sometime next week. You have to stop at 3 inns along the way. You have to wait out a blizzard for 12 hours. By the time you deliver the crown, the political landscape should have shifted, but it hasn't. The static nature of the world waits for you, making your struggle against the elements feel performative. The world isn't actually harsh, it's just paused. Then there is the Dawnguard climax. You have Auriel's bow. You're ready to storm Castle Volkihar. Isran gives a rousing speech. To the boats, we attack now. And you have to raise your hand and say, actually, Isran, it's 6 p.m. If we leave now, we'll arrive at night, and I'll be tired. Can we attack in the morning? The momentum of the crusade crashes into the wall of your circadian rhythm. You sleep in Fort Dawnguard while the vampires presumably just sit around waiting for you to kick down the door. Even the DLC Dragonborn suffers. You are in Apocrypha, the realm of Hermaeus Mora. It is a twisted library of forbidden knowledge, a plane of oblivion. And you get hungry. You have to eat a cheese wheel in the realm of a Daedric prince. Does food even work in Oblivion? Do the laws of thermodynamics apply here? The game says yes. The sheer absurdity of snacking while reading the Black Book strips the cosmic horror of its dread. You aren't losing your mind to the unknown, you're just losing your appetite. The urgency versus tedium conflict ultimately makes the Dragonborn feel small. Not small in a humble, hero of the people way, but small in a I am incapable of prioritizing way. You're the only person in Tamriel who can shout apart mountains, yet you're the only person who can't skip lunch to save a city. The narrative paints you as a demigod. The mechanics paint you as a diabetic hiker. And when the fate of the world rests on the shoulders of someone who can't walk from Whiterun to Rorikstead without a snack break, it's hard to take the apocalypse seriously. The snow is falling gently on the peaks of the Druidak Mountains. You're feeling good. You have your food, your warm armour, and your current quest is just over the next ridge. To save time, you decide to shortcut up a rocky slope, utilising that classic Skyrim mountain climbing technique, spamming the jump button while strafing sideways against a near-vertical cliff face. You crest the ridge, slip slightly, and slide down into a small V-shaped crevice between two boulders and a tree root. You try to jump out. Your character jitters. You try to sprint. You slide in place. You crouch. The camera clips into your own skull. It dawns on you with the horror of 1,000 Oblivion gates opening at once. You are stuck. In the vanilla game, this is a non-event. You sigh, open your map, click on the nearest icon and fast travel to safety. It is the universal unstuck button, the divine intervention of the game engine. But in survival mode, that button is greyed out. Fast travel is disabled. You are not just stuck in a rock, you are imprisoned by the game design. You are miles from civilization, trapped in a geometry error, and you have absolutely no way to escape. The glitch amplification effect of survival mode transforms minor annoyances into campaign-ending disasters. Skyrim is a massive, complex game, and its physics engine, the Havoc engine, is held together by duct tape and prayer. Players have accepted for over a decade that sometimes, if you step on a bone pile the wrong way, you will be catapulted into the stratosphere. But survival mode removes the safety net that made those bugs tolerable. Consider the polygonal oubliette. This is the core in-game fact that every explorer fears. The world of Skyrim is built of meshes. Sometimes these meshes do not line up perfectly. There are holes in the world, invisible walls and sticky corners where the collision data overlaps. In survival mode, finding one of these spots is worse than finding a dragon priest. If you slide behind a chest in a Dwemer ruin and can't jump back out, and you're playing on a console without access to command codes, your character's life is over. You have to reload a save. And here is where the save hygiene tragedy strikes. In survival mode, You likely aren't saving as often as you should because the menu management is tedious, or perhaps you're relying on autosaves. But if you've been walking for 45 minutes across the tundra without entering a cell which triggers an autosave, and then you get stuck in a rock, you lose everything. That ebony shield you found, gone. The levels you gained, gone. The 45 minutes of your real human life, erased. The punishment for a glitch is identical to the punishment for death, but it feels infinitely more unfair. There is a specific cruelty to the slow death by glitch. When you are stuck in geometry, the game logic continues. Time passes. This means the survival mechanics are still ticking. You are wedged between a wall and a table, unable to move, and you watch helplessly as your hunger bar grows. Then your fatigue sets in. If you are outside, the cold begins to bite. You are forced to watch your character slowly die of exposure and starvation, paralysed by a rock, while the wind howls indifferently. It is a grim, absurdist end to a hero. Here lies the Dragonborn, defeated not by Alduin, but by a wicker basket they stepped in and couldn't shake off. Let's discuss the clutter physics. In Skyrim, stepping on a kettle or a ribcage can cause it to vibrate violently and deal physics damage to you. In the base game, this is funny. Ha 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 ha, the pot killed me. In survival mode, where you have no health regeneration and limited healing supplies, tripping over a cabbage cart and taking 20 points of damage is a legitimate resource drain. You find yourself treating household objects with the same caution you treat traps. You give a wide berth to buckets, terrified they might clip through your leg and anchor you to the floor. There is an obscure lore tidbit, or rather a meta-lore concept, often discussed in the community, the Godhead. In the Elder Scrolls metaphysics, the universe is the dream of a sleeping entity. When the dream becomes unstable, reality warps. Glitches are, in a meta-sense, the dreamer twitching. Survival mode makes you hyper-aware of the fragility of this dream. When a mammoth falls from the sky and lands on you, a classic bug, killing you instantly and forcing a restart from the last bed, it feels like the universe itself is rejecting your attempt to play realistically. The combat lock glitch is another nightmare. Sometimes the game thinks you're in combat when you are not. The music plays, you cannot wait, you cannot sleep. In vanilla, you fast travel away to reset the state. In survival, you are trapped in a perpetual state of adrenaline. You can't use a bed, enemies are nearby, even though the enemy is a mud crab stuck under the map 3 miles away. You wander the land, exhausted, unable to rest, pursued by a phantom threat that prevents you from interacting with the survival mechanics you desperately need to use. This leads to the console command class war within the community debate. PC players have the ultimate spell, the tilde key, you just stand, they can type TCL, toggle collision, and float out of the rock. They can type player.reset health. Console players, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, do not have this luxury. For them, survival mode is an Iron Man challenge where a single misstep into a texture gap ends the run. Fans argue that releasing a mode that prohibits fast travel in a game known for getting players stuck is an act of developer negligence. Fix the holes in the floor before you take away my ladder, they cry. Even the horses are saboteurs. We mention their bad combat AI, but their physics are worse. A horse can decide to launch itself horizontally off a small decline, killing itself and you upon landing. Without fast travel, you spend a lot of time on horses. This increases the statistical probability of a horse physics event. You're riding along the road, and suddenly the horse vibrates, clips into the bridge, and you're both launched into the river, freezing and drowning. Then there is the quest soft lock. Some quests require an NPC to move to a certain spot to trigger the next stage. Esbern in the Ratway is infamous for this. In vanilla, you can leave the cell, fast travel, wait, and come back to reset his AI. In survival, leaving and coming back is a 30-minute process. If the NPC glitches, troubleshooting it becomes a chore that eats your entire gaming session. You spend hours trying to coax a scripted character to open a door, all while eating your cheese wheels to stay alive. The sheer anxiety of movement changes how you play. You stop exploring the corners, you stick to the centre of the road, you avoid jumping over fences, you avoid climbing mountains. You play conservatively, not because you fear the monsters, but because you fear the code. The sense of freedom, go anywhere, do anything, is replaced by a fear of the edge cases. You don't want to go to that interesting ruin on the cliff because the cliff looks glitchy and you can't afford to get stuck. Ultimately, survival mode strips away the bandages that held the Skyrim experience together. Fast travel wasn't just a convenience, it was a debugging tool. It was the reset button for when the world broke. By removing it, the developers didn't just make the game harder, they made it more fragile. You're forced to confront the technical limitations of a 2011 engine with 2024 patience, and the result is often a broken controller and a promise to never ever step off the paved road again. We arrive now at the final destination of our critique, the summit of our grievance. Throughout this chronicle, we have dismantled the mechanics of hunger, cold, fatigue, and the sheer logistical absurdity of the official survival mode. But the true tragedy of this inclusion is not just that it is flawed, it is that it exists in the shadow of giants. The Creation Club's survival mode is a pale, hollow imitation of what the community had already perfected years prior. It is a store-bought costume compared to a hand-tailored suit. Long before Bethesda officially flipped the switch on survival mode, the modding community had already solved every single problem we have discussed tonight. The gold standard, the North Star of survival gameplay, was Chesko's Frostfall. To speak of survival in Skyrim without mentioning Frostfall is to speak of painting without mentioning colour. Released in 2012, this mod didn't just add cold, it added a weather simulation system so complex and intuitive that it felt like it had been there since launch. In Frostfall, you didn't just have a binary warm-cold rating, you had coverage and exposure. A fur cloak protected you from rain, which made you wet, which made you cold. A logical step CC survival skips entirely, and snow. Standing near a fire didn't just stop a bar from shrinking, it physically dried your clothes. You could see the snow accumulating on your armour. You could see the water dripping from your cape. The visual feedback was immersive, communicating your state without needing to clutter the UI with intrusive red icons. Core in-game fact: the official survival mode has exactly one setting, on or off. You toggle it in the gameplay menu. There is no nuance. You cannot adjust the hunger rate. You cannot decide that you want the cold mechanics but not the fatigue. It is a take it or leave it monolith. Contrast this with the mod configuration menus, MCM, of community mods like I Need or Sunhelm. These allow players to tweak every variable. Do you think the hunger is too fast? Slide the bar down. Do you want eating to be automated? Check a box. Do you want to die of thirst or just get a penalty? You decide. The official mode treats the player like a child who cannot be trusted with the dials. The mods treat the player like a dungeon master crafting their own experience. The integration of camping is the most glaring comparison. As we lamented earlier, the official camping supply kit is a single-use tragedy. Compare this to the Campfire mod. In Campfire, camping is a skill tree. You gather deadwood from the surrounding trees using a harvest power that scans the area, rather than needing to find a chopping block. You build a fire. You can upgrade that fire from a flicker to a roaring inferno. You pitch a tent. You can sit inside the tent. You can lie down. You can cook on the fire. And when you are done, you pack it all up. Your tent has durability. You develop an attachment to your gear. It feels like a true ranger simulation, whereas the official mode feels like a vending machine transaction. There is a community debate that has never truly settled. The paid mods controversy. When survival mode was released via the Creation Club, it was a paid add-on, though often free for limited times or included in the anniversary edition. Fans were incensed. Why pay for a stripped-down, less functional version of something that was already available for free on the Nexus? The argument from the publisher was stability and console access, and while it is true that PlayStation users, restricted by Sony's no external assets policy, benefited from an official mode, for the vast majority of the player base, it felt like a cynical repackaging of community passion into a corporate product. It was the gentrification of a game mechanic. Let's look at the needs hierarchy. Mods like I Need or Realistic Needs and Diseases introduce thirst. Humans need water. It is the most basic survival rule. You can go weeks without food, but only days without water. The official survival mode completely ignores thirst. You can trek across the volcanic ash plains of Solstheim without taking a sip of water. It breaks the verisimilitude. Modded Skyrim has you filling water skins at rivers, boiling the water to remove parasites, and buying mead not just for the buff, but for hydration. The official mode's omission of thirst feels lazy, a gaping hole in the survival logic. Then there is the HUD, heads-up display. The official mode reuses the magicka, health stamina bars to show cold and fatigue by blacking out sections of them. It's functional, but ugly. It obscures your actual resource pools. Community mods introduced elegant, dedicated widgets, small stylized icons that faded in and out, water droplets, stomach icons that changed colour. They looked like they belonged in a modern RPG. The official implementation looks like a UI glitch. An obscure lore tidbit to frame this. The Ogma Infinium, the artifact of Hermaeus Mora, grants the reader knowledge that can reshape their capabilities, but there is a deeper concept in the lore known as the Tower and the realization of I am all are we. It is the concept of a dreamer realizing they are in a dream and gaining the power to change it. In a meta sense, the modders are the ones who have achieved Choim. They looked at the dream of Skyrim, saw its limitations and said, no. They reshaped the trees, the weather and the physics. The developers built the world, but the modders breathed life into it. To play the official survival mode is to ignore the godlike power of the community in favour of a restrictive, officially sanctioned handicap. The economy of mods versus official is also striking. Mods like Hunterborn transformed hunting from click body, get loot, into a ritual. You had to dress the kill, skin it, butcher it, harvest ingredients. It took time. It yielded meat based on your skill. In official survival, hunting is still just click body. You get the same raw meat as always, just now you have to eat it. It misses the opportunity to deepen the gameplay loop of living off the land. It adds the burden of eating without adding the joy of preparation. Consider the backpack. The Creation Club sells backpacks separately, or includes them in the bundle, and they are fine. They add carry weight. But mods like Bandolier, bags and pouches allowed you to customize your silhouette. You could wear vials on your belt, a book holder on your hip, a satchel on your shoulder. You looked like an adventurer. The official implementation is standardized and stiff. It lacks the kit-bashing aesthetic that makes a survival character feel unique. Furthermore, the compatibility issue. Because the official mode is hard-coded into the game's executable in a specific way, it often clashes with other mods unless patched. But community mods are built by the community for the community, often with built-in compatibility for vampire overhauls, werewolf overhauls, and new land masses. The official mode is an island. The modded ecosystem is a continent. The ultimate failure of the official survival mode is that it tries to turn Skyrim into a game it isn't, without giving you the tools to succeed. Mods understand that Skyrim is a power fantasy, and they offer survival as a way to earn that power. You start weak, freezing and hungry, but you can craft better cloaks, brew better teas, and build better camps. You master the elements. In the official mode, you never master the elements. You just tolerate them. You're just as cold at level 80 as you were at level 1. You are just as hungry. The progression is flat. We must also acknowledge the console reality. For years, console players looked at PC mods with envy. Survival mode was meant to be their olive branch, and while it is better than nothing, it is a bittersweet gift. It shows them the idea of survival without the soul of it. It's like being served a picture of a meal instead of the meal itself. With the advent of more open modding on consoles, Xbox specifically, even console players now have access to bushcraft and campfire ports that vastly outperform the official offering. There's almost no reason, in the current year, to stick with the Creation Club default unless you are hunting achievements. In the end, the official survival mode is a waste of time, because it respects neither your time nor your intelligence. It adds friction without fun. It subtracts features, fast travel, regen, without adding sufficient depth to justify the loss. It is a checklist of annoyances masquerading as a difficulty setting. It looks at the vibrant, chaotic, brilliant world of Skyrim modding, takes the most superficial elements, strips away the passion, and presents it as a premium feature. If you truly want to survive in Skyrim, if you want to feel the bite of the wind and the gnawing of hunger in a way that enhances your story rather than hindering it, turn off survival mode. Go to the mod menu, download Frostfall, download Campfire, download I Need. Experience what this game was meant to be when love, not a mandate, guides the design. Let the community show you the way. And so, we come to the end of our long trek across the frozen north. We have complained, we have critiqued, and we've trudged through the snows of frustration together. But now, let's set aside the mechanics and the menus. Let's put down the controller and the heavy burden of the Dragonborn. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are back in that tent, not the single-use one that frustrated us, but a warm, sturdy shelter of your own making. The fire is crackling softly, a gentle rhythmic popping of pine wood that pushes back the chill of the pale. Outside, the wind is still howling, but it can't reach you here. You are safe. You are warm. Picture the night sky above Skyrim. The twin moons, Massa and Secunda, are hanging low and full, casting a silver-blue glow over the white peaks. The auroras are beginning to unfurl, great curtains of green and violet drifting lazily among the stars. The music of the world has slowed down to that deep, resonant cello, the sound of peace after battle. You don't need to eat, you don't need to sleep. You don't need to worry about your carry weight or your warmth rating. Those are just numbers, and they are fading away now. All that remains is the atmosphere, the memory of the journey, and the comfort of knowing that the world will wait for you. The dragons are sleeping. The Draugr are silent in their tombs. The roads are quiet. Breathe in, Let the tension of the day, the glitches, the grind, the noise, melt away like snow on a hearth. You have done enough. You have walked far enough. It is time to rest. Sweet dreams.